You did Mel.
Huh?
Did Mel?
No, yes,
Okay.
she comes away.
His computer right now. Okay, the Board of Sign Language Interpreters Rules Advisory Committee meeting is convening at 9:38 a.m. on October 1st, 2025. This meeting is being held in person through Zoom video conference and is being recorded. The recording will be posted to the internet for public viewing. I will now call roll. Darcy? Here. Natalie?
I'm here. Sorry. I'm here.
Al?
Here.
Didn't see you there. Lori? Here. Caitlin? Here. Lucy? Present. Amber? Late. Amanda? Erin? Here. And I think is Maya online?
Who?
Maya?
No, she's not attending.
Members, when you wish to speak, please state your first name for the record. Committee members are asked to not use the during meetings. Health licensing office asks individuals attending through Zoom keep their phones muted and cameras off during the entire meeting or until they're given an opportunity to comment during the public and interested parties feedback period. Public comment is limited to matters listed on the meeting agenda or topics relevant to what this committee's statutory authority to regulate. Public wishing to speak, please sign on the roster in front of the room or email Josh Page at josh.page@oha.oregon.gov and provide your first and last name. Everyone is asked to use appropriate language and under these protocols to conducting committee business. Now, call to order. Okay, everybody get their materials. Final copy was yesterday. So I'm gonna walk you through them. So just to kind of start getting our minds right. We've had a lot of meetings, about this is our 15th. We went through all the rules, all the license types. There are a few things that have come up that we went back on, which we'll address if necessary. We're going to be focusing the remainder of the meetings on the Senate Bill 950, what we have to get done for January 1st. Technically, the other stuff could wait until further down. That would not be my preference. I would like to get all wrapped up. But yeah, what we have, that's an option. And then basically at the end of this meeting, we'll see where we are. We barely have a forum for tomorrow, so I want to kind of get, head count for tomorrow, and then also look to the middle of the month in October and see where we are. Hopefully we won't have to have all 3 meetings. We'll get the gift of a day. We'll see. But I set things up a little differently. We're not going to have executive session today. So the first thing, tomorrow's agenda will be different. So today we're going to do sign language, interpreter, and training. All the stuff about that. And then tomorrow we're doing the people who are working in Oregon, but they're not physically present, people that are in Oregon temporarily working. I can explain more in depth. So the agendas have to be different. It can't be like, oh, hey, if we did this, might do it tomorrow, because we can't do that. We used to be able to do that.
No, that's going to be
Oh, Mel?
Hey, Sammy, I'm having a hard time hearing you. I'm
Can you hear me
sorry.
now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. It's just a little muffled or distant.
Yeah.
Are those the mics?
Yeah.
Maybe volume a little bit higher. So we can talk.
Yeah.
So see the
Same meeting.
Okay.
I'm utilizing the captions too.
Okay, so the first thing that will, I gave everybody the definitions. Again, I put the page numbers at the top of the numbers, at the top of the pages, so we know what we're looking at. So the way I set this up is everything
What
about
page was the definitions? 17? Was it?
page 17 is definitions. Nothing's changed here. We'll just reference this if necessary or add definitions if we need. So it's just kind of a reference. So the way I set it up is on page 20, has sign language interpreters in training. On page 21, has the Senate Bill 950 language. Exactly what's in the bill as a reference point. And then starting on page 23, is this a bulleted summary of what the bill does and questions that the RAC needs to answer. Now note, starting on page 24, highlighted boxes is what you get to look at today. It's not on a highlighted box often. And here's why, because we've done it. We've done it and we've probably done it more than once. So, but everything in the sign language training is on the place. We can do it. So everything is here. Now, if I provided a gray box, it means there's a question there and I've probably provided you an example. But I don't want you to think that that is absolutely what you must do. I want you to know it's for you guys to contemplate. So if there's a gray box, it's a contemplation. What I've also done, so you've got,
I don't see on my printout, I don't see highlighted portion.
beginning on page 24.
You printed theirs off. not-
Oh, your guys' isn't in color. Well, it's gray. Your
Oh.
guys' is gray.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we're on the
If it's
same page.
gray.
Yeah, because you're saying highlighted and I didn't see it, so,
If
okay.
it's gray,
Just want to make sure.
it's on
Great,
there.
that's fine, I'll look for gray,
hadn't thought of that.
no problem.
This is one of the interpreters speaking. Darcy, I'm sorry, I can't see your hands at all.
I'm sorry, can you see me
Or
now?
we can look over here.
It's Amanda. For those of us with a black and white copy, I think that the gray, your gray is outlined for us, just so you can specify.
Like in a black box.
It just has a like, your yellow is our gray,
Got it.
your gray has like a.
A line around it. Got it.
Yeah.
Tomorrow yours will be color. Promise.
The interpreters have a colored copy if somebody wants to have it.
You don't need the colored copy.
And you guys have my color.
It's just as long as as you reference page numbers
Yes,
and to make
I will
sure we
reference
can
page. So
find
starting
exactly
page
what we're talking about.
24 is the gray.
Great.
I have highlighted. And there is questions now, with the box around it, are my questions or contemplations. And so everything about the sign language interpreter and training license is in this text. So you've got the who we are, who it is, how to get the application, how to get the license. How to renew the license and the continuing education of the license. So we'll just go through all of it, and I've set every license type up like that. So for example, if you take the provisional, I'll just walk through this one very quickly. Nothing's really highlighted here. All of this we've done until we get to dormant status. That's on page 44. Nothing highlighted here. Nothing highlighted until we get to the EIPA scoring, where you guys wanted to transition the score from 3.5 to whatever you want to go up to. So only get a look at this. And then the renewal of the dormant status. But this one, I'll make these ones a copy. So how to put your license in dormant status and how to get it out. And that's it. So it's only if we have to review something on the other license. So that's how I've set it up. unfortunately not in color.
It's fine, it works.
We can't think of everything. Okay, is there any? And then when we finish each section, we'll go through a fiscal impact. I kind of started an outline for myself, so I'll help walk you guys through that, what it might look like, ideas, things I've used for other boards, and you guys have told me things I don't realize, so and the RAC has to do the fiscal impact, at least giving, ideas of what agencies might be affected, or what public members might be affected, or small businesses might be affected.
Tammy,
Yes.
Deanna joined at 9:47. She's here.
Okay, so are we ready to start sign language interpreting training license? So with this license, new license type, and the way my understanding is it's set up, so it's a lower level than the provisional. This one is direct in-person supervision, so that right next to you. And then you have the same thing, you have to be in compliance with the professional code of conduct. The RAC is to recommend requirements to get the license, minimum qualifications to the board, which I provide you some examples. And pay fees, which we'll talk about next time. And how to renew the license on case basis. So, and then the questions for them. So we'll walk through, we'll start on page 24. Grade 24. And so some of these things are obvious, that it's just from the statute, or it's something we use maybe in provisional, like the definition of supervisor. So one is, may only provide sign language interpretation services under supervision of a person holding a supervisory or generalist license. That's 1A. 1B is may have more than one supervisor. That's something that was in provisional. I don't know if you want that still. May not supervise any person providing, cannot supervise anyone else. And then there's the direct in-person supervision. I didn't have any questions about any of this, but you guys can provide feedback. Yes, ma'am.
This is Amanda. I would just suggest 1A, read may only provide sign language interpreting services under the direct supervision, since we have other kinds of supervision in other licenses.
Okay.
So I know it says it explicitly in 2, but I think it would just be clearer to add direct there.
This is Lori. When you say direct, do you mean that person needs to be there
Yeah.
at the time?
Yep. This is Amanda. How are we doing turn taking? Or are you running? Okay.
I guess I will.
Are you thinking it should say direct in person?
I'm thinking that would be clearer.
Okay, yeah,
probably.
sure. Yeah, no, I'm good with that. I wanted to just differentiate it from the other kinds of supervision we have in other licenses. So yeah, direct in person works for me too.
So we're not allowing virtual direct
Is this for,
in training, yes, but you can't like be having Zoom or FaceTime, still have direct supervision, if someone's watching you actively. Just clarifying.
This is Amanda, that's a really good. This is Amanda, that's a really good point, because what if the job is a BRI job? So everyone's virtual. Does that count as in person? Right?
This is Erin. I agree with that. And I wonder if we need to define what direct means. And maybe that would make it clearer. So direct just means they're present at the time of the interpretation, whether it's virtual or in person.
It's my understanding that it's in the room. That direct and in-person means that they're in the room. Here's why. The bill says something specific about the bill you have on page 69. The Senate bill, I say that I think, it's my understanding that the sign language and training is you have to be in the room like this. We're together in the room, and you're watching the meeting, not on Zoom or anything like that. So here's why. If you go to provisional, in provisional, it specifies that you don't have to be in the room. So it's my understanding that when they differentiate that in legislation, that they.
I'm sorry, page 70, where on page 70 are we right now? Or where
I
are you
don't know.
referencing right now?
I think it's 71.
Bottom of page 71, top of 72.
Okay, 70, it says 71 is a
And
section 3.
so section 6, bottom of page 71, top of page 72. You got little b, little c, little d, little e, 2, 3, and then 3 has 3 may provide sign language services only under the supervision of a supervisory sign language interpreter. The supervision may include supervision by remote means and need not be in real time.
For provisional.
Correct.
On page 71, read A. That's where it's saying it has to be in person.
Correct. Okay. For the sign language and training. And because they're different, my understanding is that the legislature, if they made it that way, they did it on purpose. They thought about it.
Sorry. Do you know, Darcy, did you see where that was written in the law? Because I'm not seeing it.
Next page. Are you talking about the
Right, I see
On
that.
page-
That's
on
on
page
page 71 under sections. 3A, oh no, 3B. Under 3B. No, I was wrong. It is 3A. Section 3. Direct in-person supervision, license holder. Supervising.
the top of page 71?
The language is in there, at the top of 71, yes. Thank you, Rivers.
I'm just wondering if we could just put that in the definitions, define what direct supervision is.
It's there.
Darcy says yes. Go ahead, Amanda.
So I'm curious the who this is for, sign language interpreters and training. I'm imagining it's students on internship who may have a virtual assignment. So a VRI assignment in an educational setting or in a medical setting or in a, maybe not medical, but like they might be actually doing their internship virtually. They're virtually interpreting a college class, et cetera. So the direct makes sense, real time. The in-person, if we define it this way, or if we define it together in real time via a virtual, that's gonna make a difference. I mean, this is gonna be a huge impact on interpreter training programs if we're not allowed to have any virtual supervision. And not, how was it worded? Remote and may not be in real time. Like, I'm on board with real time. I just think it needs to be not only physically in person. But I don't know that we have that latitude with the bill if we define things differently.
This is Lori, and I don't think that's our call to make at this point. From the way I read that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's the way Senate Bill 950 reads, and that's what it is. So we need to figure out how to make that work for now.
Aaron, I want to get a clarification because just because it says that particular language under provisional, are you suggesting that that's why it has to be that same way for sign language or in training? Because to me, it doesn't matter if it's different. Just because it says, like for provisional, it has to be, it could be, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but for provisional, it could be, you know, it's direct, but it doesn't have to be in real time. But I guess, but I don't feel like it says that really explicitly under the in training piece unless I'm completely lost. But I'm agreeing with what is being said in general about it's gonna be incredibly limiting if you can't let sign language in training interpreter get direct supervision from, in a virtual visit from someone who's not sitting next to them. So.
This is Mel. I understand the complication here too, but I'm also thinking like some of my interpreters team in the same room when they're virtual. There are ways to work around it. Doesn't mean they can't do virtual assignments. It just means it might look different for them. And where you're thinking about a novice brand new interpreter, teaming remotely might be more of an advanced skill, learning how to manage all of the teaming aspects in a remote setting, as compared to being in the same room and learning how to get support from a team in person and then transferring that skill to the remote environment. So I'm not saying that we can't play with this a little bit, but there are ways to support new interpreters that might just look different in a remote and virtual setting. So I get curious about having it in the statute as it is. And if we can work around it or not. That is all.
Sammy? This is Sammy. So I think what I'm hearing is that you would want to define in-person as something other than in the room. If you have the option, that would be what you're asking.
I'm wondering if we're overthinking it. In person, if your face is there, can we count that? Or is it being too narrow in our thinking?
I think it's something that we can look at.
This is Darcy. I'm just thinking, kind of what Mel said with in-person, face-to-face, essentially having that support for an in-training interpreter as opposed to virtual.
If we allow virtual, does that mean we're allowing individuals to take this role out of state? What are the implications of that? Does that mean a student gets this going? I guess my thoughts are what it would actually look like when implemented. And then we maybe need to consider other perspectives to make sure we know clearly what it means. If it is remote, if we do allow remote, the person providing supervision, what if they have technical issues? Is there a backup plan? Is there a contingency for if the supervisor loses connection? Does the in-training interpreter continue working or has to immediately cease? Because if it's in person, like for example, an interpreter training program type of situation, the interpreter comes and there are situations where the team interpreter or supervisor might arrive late or might not be able to make it, maybe is ill and not able to go at all. Then the interpreting student isn't allowed to even enter the setting, they just leave. So because they're not allowed to enter the setting and begin interpreting without the supervisor.
from my perspective, how this is going to all look remotely, will we have the same rules as we do currently for in-person, on site? So that's a perspective that we need to consider. It's sort of a new direction that we're taking here, but it is worth considering. Go ahead, Amanda. This is Amanda. I agree with what you said. And two things. One, I think that, the program guidelines and rules and expectations we set there. But any supervisor, regardless if it's remote, does have to have their supervisory license from the state of Oregon. It can't just be anyone. It has to be following this supervisory license from the state of Oregon. And so that is an important protection that we have as well. So I'm just throwing that out there, but I do agree with what you said, that it could cause more discussion and requirements of programs and rules and expectations of students, and parameters surrounding those. So I'm agree with that. Go ahead, Sandy.
So is it something that you still want to consider as defining in person as something other than in the room? Is that still the intention? And you could maybe, if you lost the connection, in my mind, you have to stop. The in-training person would have to stop. You could add that under the supervision piece. You could put it there. Okay, so, and then to your question, so we'll, work on that then. Amanda, you asked who this is for, so if you go to page 25, up to page 25. This is to, up to page 25, number 6.
Hold on a second. Okay.
So this, an SLI in training license holder is for individuals providing sign language interpretation services who do not meet the requirements of a supervisor, generalist, or provisional. Purpose of the license is for individuals to improve their skills and gain experience. This could include, but is not limited to, students in an interpretation program, interns, or individuals outside of the interpretation education program. That's kind of everything. Or is there other people that you would want to add to that?
This is Amanda. Is this from the law?
This is for you to contemplate.
Right, but like this is an example, right? Okay, now I remember you saying that. This is an example of what it could say, but the law doesn't actually say who it's for. It just says it's another license that's different than, we have to differentiate it from the other license. Okay, thank you.
I have another question. This is very thinking. I'm thinking if a student or any person who wanted a training but hasn't had a license, but they want to get the in-training license. So before they do that, if they're out, working as an interpreter with an actual client, correct? That's kind of the point there. So is that in the rule currently? In Senate Bill 950, does it cover that? Okay. So if a person currently, so with the new law, if they're in training specifically, does it mean that any student who's in an ITP program or and any person who wants to or is motivated to get into the interpreting profession even though those people, they have to get the license, the in-training license before they're actually out working with a client, whether virtually or in person, interpreting, doing interpreter, they have to get this license first, right? Before they can go ahead with any type of interpreting work, is that true? And if they don't have the license, then they cannot do their internship essentially, is that correct?
This is Sandy, that is correct. And those examples were pulled from testimony that was provided during, when the bill was heard.
Okay, I just wanted to make that clear, because I think part of the, FAQ section, when it talks about in training, I just wanted to make sure that it's clarified, you must have this license before you can even start any kind of in-person or any kind of work. Mel, go ahead. See your hands up.
Thank you. I just also want to, the other side of that coin is that places where we typically have internships or interns placed, like the educational setting, like PCC, that we will have to pair them with a general or supervisory interpreter. So there's implications on the hiring entity as well, or the placement site as well.
This is Darcy. How many times, can you renew for the in-training license? Tammy?
So you can renew it on a case-by-case basis, that's the same. And, page, starting on page 28. There's a couple different options. I gave you the option I like the best, but it doesn't have to be the option. Which is basically you guys that, make some different, whatever qualifiers you want, A, B, C, E's, who's the supervisor, and if they do those things, then they can renew, and they, doesn't have a limit. So, be forever. Go ahead, Lori.
On page 29, I'm curious about the inactive license renewal. When we say it may be inactive for up to 3 years before it expires, under what circumstances would it not be?
They don't renew. Maybe I don't understand your question.
Well, maybe I'm not understanding what inactive means. It's inactive, they didn't renew after the first year. It's just sitting there, that's inactive.
Could have been after the 9th year. Once they
Well,
have, so if you go
okay.
inactive January 31st of 2024, you know, submit your renewal application and fees, you go in.
Okay,
And you can be inactive for 3 years and then it expires.
okay.
Reapply.
It's the may be inactive. We know that oh, because it may not be the full 3 years, is what you're saying. Okay, okay, got it. Never mind. This is Amanda. This is more of a question for HLO, I think. Now, in an ideal world,
the sign language interpreter in training would have a supervisor or maybe two supervisors if they're in like a regular setting with a, like a K-12 setting or a place like that. But if they're in a freelance setting, they could have a billion, that's obviously hyperbolic, but like they could have 30 different people that they've worked with in a freelance setting. Do you really want 30 supervisors? I'm just thinking about streamlining it for the HLO office of like what that paperwork looks like for the supervisor. Or if it's just a notification of like, hey, now I'm working with Caitlin. Hey, now I'm working with Darcy. Hey, now I'm working with whoever. Or do you actually have to like go through and approve those people? I don't know what the process looks like on your side.
I mean, we would just check to make sure that they haven't.
Have the license?
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, we can take one moment to switch interpreters.
Maybe open a can of worms.
Okay, this is Darcy speaking. License, what was I gonna ask? Oh, if we have multiple supervisors. So I feel like it's a bit vague in the language here for renewal. I don't know if Sammy, you might have already mentioned this, maybe I missed it. If a supervisor is not able to continue, we don't qualify, or whatever that checklist is, to maintain the licensure. They don't meet that level, they're not able to maintain that. How would it be measured? Like, for example, let's say a person maybe an interpreter, a supervisory interpreter doesn't approve an in-training interpreter for continued in training. So they look for somebody else maybe who would allow them to try to renew their licensure. So is there a way that is measured, that is considered if a supervisor declines to supervise someone wanting to be in training, whereas somebody else approves it and takes them on? What is the perspective there, and what are the steps, I guess, involved? Are there any steps? If 3 supervisory interpreters say no, and then 1 or 2 say yes, we'll take them. Is that a consideration? Just kind of throwing that out there. Can the person keep renewing their license, I guess, an in-training license, even though they are being declined by supervisory interpreters?
This is Sammy. I mean, you could set that as a requirement. I mean, you could have every sign language interpreter in training that wants to renew, go to the board. But you're gonna have to set some criteria of what, so you could, let's say, we use Darcy's example, if somebody was declined by 3 supervisory interpreters, they can't renew. You could, I mean, it's vague enough in the bill, but you could do that. I don't know that I would advise it, but you could do it.
Okay. Erin?
I think, we don't know the reasons why people are being declined, it could be they're just too busy. So I wouldn't want to do it just on the merits of only declinations, because it could be that they just can't, they don't have the capacity to supervise any more people. So I see what their concern is coming from, because maybe this person's been worked with a lot and they just can't seem to get it, right? And so maybe there's some other mechanism for the supervisor to turn in information to the board that describes specifically why this isn't working and all the things that they've tried and it just isn't. Because we want to try to encourage people, but if you do all the encouraging you can, you're just not making any headway. You have to be able to explain that instead of just have it be based on declarations.
Right. Lori?
If I understood Darcy's question correctly, the question was not about finding a supervisor for an in-training interpreter. It was the renewal of the license for an in-training interpreter. And if the supervisory person has said, no, they shouldn't be renewed, but somebody else who's a supervisor has said, yes, that person can be renewed, who wins that battle?
The board decides.
Right, that is kind of what I'm thinking, like, if I have 3 supervisors and 2 supervisory interpreters say this person is not ready, they can't, they should not continue in the field if it's their second or third time around in training and still not getting it. So it might be like, maybe by the 3rd renewal, if their skills have not improved, if they've plateaued, at what point do they stop? At what point? Because right now, I understand what you said, that there's no limit on renewals technically according to the bill. So is there a way to clearly set an expectation where a person getting into the field might realize, I don't have the skills right now, and maybe the skills won't develop. If we can have something set up or arranged, an expectation for those in that situation. Who'd like to go first? Amanda? Amanda, Sammy? Sammy.
The way that would work is they would apply to take a test. And if they don't pass the test, then they haven't got the skills that they need to get the new license. I think the legislature was vague enough to allow people as much time as they needed. Also, that's the measurement tool, right, in an exam. I mean, if you were gonna have, you would have to set a measurement tool if you wanted the board to decide if they are ready or not. Have the board have an exam, or do they, something, and because you'd have to hold it out the same way for everyone. And that's why whatever examination criteria is used for a provisional or for the generals, whatever, always the same for whoever takes that test. So that's the marker. You can also always, if you're worried about people not having or not doing well, you can require that they provide every person they provided service to they show us information and make a complaint. You could do that as well.
Amanda? This is Amanda, and maybe it's along the same lines as Sammy, but I think that there's fairly low risk someone continuing to renew unnecessarily. Because they have to find someone who's willing to bear with them as they renew. And so I feel like it's relatively low risk a situation. Like, I understand the thinking there. I mean, if they can last for 10 years in training, I guess that's a possibility. Someone could, but they'd have to have someone with them the entire time, someone supervising them the entire time. They're never alone in that situation. So I think what Sammy's saying is right. Our community and culture is trying to encourage others to reach out. And technically, they could be in that situation and be there. Aaron?
Can you remind me, okay, there's not a limit on the number of times that a sign language interpreter training can be new, or is it 3 times?
No,
There's no limit.
According to this.
So in order to scale up, to become generalist, I think, which is next, right, or the provisional, then they would have to meet, I'm sorry, I don't remember off the top of my head what's required to make a provisional, but you'd have to have some sort of proof that you can get to that level, and that's either approval from the people that have been supervising you, right, or pass a test. Okay. So that would kind of be the mechanism, as you're saying, to prevent people who don't really have those skills to continue on. Okay, thank you.
Deanna has her hand up as well.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you. This may have already been addressed and I may have missed it, but for the interpreters who are in training, where would be the protection to make sure that, I don't know, like maybe this would never happen, but that because this is the ex-sister-in-law or brother-in-law of my, so-and-so, and because there's some kind of animosity there that that person wouldn't give them a good review or something like that. I mean, is there some type of protection in place for that?
Sammy?
This is Sammy. I don't No, I don't know that I understand what, how that applies here.
I'm sorry, because we were talking about the in training. This is Deanna, sorry. We were talking about the interpreters in training and how about renewing their, their in training. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. So I was just kind of thinking outside the box there, thinking, is there a protection to make sure, I'm sure it is only seen in the movies or something like that, where somebody wouldn't give a good review because of personal feelings and things like that. Is there anything, any type of protection for that?
You guys would have to decide that.
Aaron?
I think that, you know, those personality conflicts are gonna happen for whatever reason, right? And so, but the thing is, that's hopefully just one person, and hopefully they'll have several other supervisors who can then, you know, say that they're good enough. Unless that person really has a horrible personality, like no one can get along with it, but I would like to think that that hopefully isn't the case, because we probably are in the right field there. That's difficult.
Yes. Lori, or, yeah, Lori? Oh, Christie?
I'm just thinking about also the testing. I could see in training license holders being kind of stuck there for a couple of years automatically, because if they're in training and they have not yet taken the test, and the test takes up to a year to get back, you're kind of caught in that loop as well, for as long as they can continue, but just wait on the test first.
Amanda. I also wanted to throw out there, I don't know, for the community colleges program requirements, but at Western Oregon, we do require students to take the NIC written so that they would qualify for the provisional. They wouldn't even have to go to in training unless they're waiting on the results or something like that occurred. So that is something, that is another concept that is not as limiting as much as we think. This is Darcy. Yes, a lot of our students do take the written test, the NIC written, while they are usually spring term or soon after graduation, whenever they'd like to, whenever they can afford it. Typically, they will pass with a high percentage of the students will pass, and then they just have their performance part remaining for the certification.
Okay, so, um, licenses are only good for 1 year, unlike all the others. Is there other people that you want to include in the list that of people who could get the license, or covers everybody? Okay, then we'll transition down, oh, so just to recap.
I think this is Darcy. I think one thing we should clarify, and I think it's clear in person, but the remote portion, I think, needs to be clarified. That if something were to go wrong, that there is an expectation that the interpreter in training does something to make sure that there's some.
Something similar, so that like they are not interpreting that interaction without supervision, just like it would happen in in-person situation where if the supervising interpreter was not to show up, it was not able to.
Lori?
I'm looking at the bottom of page 26. There's 7C, it says 3 letters of recommendation following, but there's following that up
Or
for
not for you to decide, if you want letters or.
Oh. What was that saying?
That's if they choose to do letters of recommendation.
Aaron?
So it sounds like I just want to make sure, I feel like we've already transitioned to 26.
Yeah, I'm just gonna recap.
I wanted to make sure we closed up 25 before we moved on.
Yes, so 3 things that I heard were, somewhere in this first rule that, adding that in order to provide services, you must, no matter what, hold this license. That was something Darcy mentioned. Look at defining in-person as in the room and remote. And then, making sure that if it is remote, that under the supervision rules here, that we address something happens to connection or whatever, person doesn't show up. So you kind of wrap that one into one. So those were the 3 things I had. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
We're gonna take a moment to switch intruders. Amanda.
Go ahead.
So the first part seems fine, the part that's up for us to look at, the 40 hours, the 10 hours, the 3 letters. Isn't that the same as what we require in provision? As one of the alternative paths.
When we have bank, they have to have a degree and have to be fluent in ASL, fluent in English, so it's not, there's more.
Okay.
So this is Sam, so I went, Haley, qualification specialist for this board. I don't know if you guys are on that, she's probably listening. Anyway.
This is the interpreter. Would you mind speaking up a little bit?
Yes. So Haley, the qualification specialist for this board, went through and did a review of all the states. And these were some of the themes I saw in other states. This is really the only one I saw that's unique like this. Arkansas, I think, has an apprenticeship that's the most. But these were just ideas that I got. We can use them.
Thank you, Amanda. Sammy?
Yes, so if we are on page. Page 26. So 1, 2, 3, 4, all standard HLO stuff, what's already in the statute. 5 is a test that the person will only provide sign language services and the supervision of the licensee, so that's a signature. And then submit information identifying the applicant supervisor and provide information about the supervisor on a form described by the office, which is our application.
This is, I'm sorry, this is the interpreter. Would you please?
Yes.
Wouldn't mind speaking up a little bit?
Yes, I would reading, so. Submit information identifying the applicant supervisor and provide information about the supervisor on a form prescribed by the office. So that's something that you could, I would not recommend taking on, but there's a way that we can link supervisors to a licensee. So it could be 30 supervisors. That would be fine.
I'm sorry, Sammy, the last thing you said again.
It could be 30 supervisors. It could be 30, 40, 10, 20, and we would just attach them. And sometimes people don't notify us, and then they do.
This is Caitlin. Can I suggest that we add provides SLI services under the direct supervision under 5?
So that it matches.
Yeah. I'll make sure it matches throughout. Awesome.
Amanda? This is Amanda. I actually have a question about the paperwork for supervisors, just to clarify. So if I'm gonna apply for this this sign language and training license, and I put Caitlin down. Does Caitlin know I put her down? Does she have to sign off on that? She has to sign off on my application, like I have to say like, hey, Caitlin.
Yes.
And then she says yes, but if she says no, I can't. If I put her down, she'll know somehow. Like there's some sort of checks and balances that I can't just like put whoever I want down without getting. Does that make sense?
Are you asking me if we're calling the supervisor to verify that, no, we're not. doing
Or
that.
some sort of check.
What check would you be?
I mean, does she literally sign my form?
Correct.
Oh, okay, fine, then that's the check. Unless I forged it. Let's not do that.
If the supervisor has to sign off, does that mean that's the only supervisor? Because that brings us back to the discussion around multiple supervisors. So is it good enough to have one, but then when you actually resubmit your hours for renewal, and you have a variety of supervisors, can you do that?
Erin?
I'm wondering if you wanna, to address your point, Christie, is on number 6. Submit information identifying the applicant supervisor S in parentheses.
Yes.
And provide information about the supervisor S in parentheses on a form prescribed by the office.
Yes, and this is just for the application, renewals down the road, but we could address it there. You could add on paper, keep adding. We'll have to decide if the supervisor needs to sign off on the renewal. That would mean they can't renew online, those implications we should address.
Amanda, did you have a comment? Christine?
This is Kristen. Looking at number 7 and the suggested, you said that was based on trends that you've seen. So those that are in interpreting program, where does 40 hours of interpreting coursework put a student in the time frame? Like how much?
One term.
Caitlin, I'm just trying to think, let me correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we have 20 hours annually for our other licenses, is that correct? Like it's a total of 60 hours? Yeah. So, oh, this is out. Just kidding. Never mind, forget it. We'll talk about that later in renewing. But I think you're. Sister, see. Number 7. 8. And or B, either one. Suppose you have a person who is, training, and they're they're in an interpreting training program. Or coder, somebody else with signing skills who hasn't taken the training program yet, but is doing the workshops, is out there doing their thing, getting the training. Does HLO have a way to identify that type of person and the coursework that's needed for the 40 hours? Somebody who's not in an interpreting training program to still get the education that they need? And do we need to expand on that? Does HLO need to expand on that? Or are we just gonna kind of leave it as is?
That's unclear. What?
This is Amanda. These definitions, coursework and workshops and ethics, how are you as HLO determining what qualifies for those 40 hours and those 10 hours? Do you need a list from us? Do you need something more specific? Does the title just need to have those words? How will you evaluate that?
Is that up to us or is that up to the board?
It's up to the board.
Sorry. See your name tag.
Can't see it. This is Amber speaking. Attractively.
So Amanda, do we really want to just leave it more vague?
suppose, you know, a person takes a workshop and it's entitled sign language interpreting or ethics or something in the description, is that enough to go ahead and just be like, all right, you're good? Do we need or want more specifics, or should we just go ahead and leave it a little more vague until it probably shows up? Oh, that's a good question. I mean, part of it, I mean, some people could be taking like, I don't know, something, interpreting or ethics that's not really related to interpreting. Could be something more general, like, I don't know, there's the things on the internet, who knows what they're taking. So maybe we do need some more clarification on that to keep it a little more specific towards the interpreting field. Maybe not currently, maybe not right now, but you will be more specific. Yeah, just like the 40 hours for B, I think that's pretty good. I think that's pretty clear. I like the way that is. But A, the hours, maybe it can be a little more general, maybe it can be like more specific to sign language interpreting. I don't know, just an idea. Go ahead, Kate. Or excuse me, Christine.
This is Christine. I still require my educational interpreters to provide 12 hours seat time. And I specifically look through their certifications, make sure it's related to interpreting. And I've had many interpreters say, what about this? It's like, nope, that doesn't count. It has to be related to your role.
Sammy. This is Sammy. Under provisional, you have, on page 46. I'll just read it out loud. Pathway 3. Having received 40 hours of education and training related to sign language interpretation, this education and training may include, but is not limited to, workshops, symposiums, and seminars. Maybe you want a more specific for the training person? I don't know, just give them that little option. Or you don't have to have this qualifier at all.
Aaron, I like that language, we could just kind of, because I like consistency, so we could have having received, I mean, I don't know if we want to include both of those sentences, but we could at least have the first sentence. I mean, both or just the first, I think would be good, because then it's consistent.
This is Amanda. Now that we're actually looking at pathway 3 for provisional, I don't see how it's different. Yeah. Than the in-training people.
Well, you have to have the ASL code.
Well, you should need that in training too.
It's not in the training. Remember, we give this option. This,
So that's the only difference.
start throwing all of us and start over. I mean, we can walk through the pathways, mix them up, if you like.
I just would consider maybe doing less hours to apply for an in-training license than we do for a provisional license.
Hot take, this is Amber speaking. Hot take, hot, very hot. What if in-training license had no hours at all? And in training, they're going to be assigned to a supervisor anyway. The whole objective, if I'm mistaken, let me know. The whole purpose of an in-training license is that you are in training. It is expected that you are going to continue coursework, ITP, etc.
But not required. You don't have to be an IT. I don't know.
But there's gonna be renewal caps on that as well, right?
No.
with Erin. That's controversial because it makes me think, so I don't know sign language at all. So could I just go in and sign up for this? And I've never taken a sign language course. Like, wouldn't I be a waste of time for my supervisor? Because I have no idea what I'm doing.
Why would a supervisor sign off on you then?
That's a good question. But I think we have to have some sort of, I think they need to have some sort of training in ASL first. I mean, you all know better than me what that minimum number is, but, yeah.
Okay, interesting, hot take, like it. What if we do the English and ASL proficiency, require that, because that makes sense. But I might, like, yes, interpreting coursework makes sense for an intern, or whatever you wanna call it. But then we put in hours of coursework, workshops, etc., for the renewal part. So to apply, you don't need anything. To keep it up, you need to have obvious investment into your career.
As a person who works with interpreting programs, I can tell you that I would not accept an training student who has had no coursework. My staff don't have enough time to go back to the very beginning. They need to have something to at least be placed in my program.
Erin, so it makes me think, if we just don't even look at this at all, and the suggestions, and we think, what is the bare minimum that you want your person to have before you'll start working with them? Maybe that's what we need to think, instead of letting this influence our decision.
You're gonna say this out loud. Fairly sure I'm gonna regret it. But in testimony, they did reference somebody who's deaf wanting to become an interpreter. And I don't know if they would have any coursework. So that was a specific reference made with this. Just as an more information. And you might have the same scenario with Dakota or Soda. They know it, they're fluent, but they don't have the coursework. So be thinking about that.
This is Amanda. I think it's really important to have something to apply bare minimum. I'm thinking there needs to be something, some sort of like to be a professional interpreter, meaning, you know, so you can sign the languages and speak language, fine, that's not enough. So for me personally, my bias would be you must have a minimum of like some ethics training just to help them, you know, sort of figure out, make the appropriate decisions, what jobs do I take, what jobs do I not. I think that should be a bare minimum out there. Sure, you should have some, you know, interpreting thought skills and whatnot, but those things can be picked up on the street. I really feel that there needs to be some sort of minimum established, something so that when you show up at a space to interpret and provide a service, that it is professional distance.
And pause for a minute.
Go ahead.
I'm throwing this out there. I'm thinking about minimums. So if we're looking at a coda, soda, et cetera. If, you know, we've been working with a lot of interpreters, you know, deaf or whoever, and the minimums, like sorry, Jason, keep back up for a minute. So many, you know, the minimums, like if that's a bare minimum for like a supervisor, but for, I'm thinking about consumers who are using interpreting services, and it doesn't matter who you are as a consumer, there's a great variance that you get. And people who have had no formal training, are often have really good production skills. You know, the codas and sodas, their signing is great, but then there are other parts that you're like, oh, you have zero skill in this other department.
Ethics are lacking.
Is what I'm thinking. So, you know, how are we gonna have that discussion? How are we gonna talk about process? How are we gonna get that support to those people? So, if we're valuing the supervisor's time, kind of what Christy was saying, our time in providing support to these people and giving them knowledge and having these discussions, if there's no basis there or foundation there, that's just a perspective from a client's perspective, of the supervisor. Go ahead.
That's fine. This is Amber speaking.
I think two really important things to consider here are first, a coda or soda. Up until now, we have seen more and more hearing interpreters who are not codas and not sodas. And they're English only as far as first language. So my point is that, also that group is actually a pretty small group of people now. It has really dwindled down compared to what it was. Also, I'm just taking the pulse of the room and trying to figure out what do we need to do with in-training interpreters? Where do we place them? Where are they going? Why are they there? And what do we expect from that?
Why are we placing in Christie's program?
We're looking into that program, like, is it if people who are in training? Is it provisional interpreters? Right, so this specific placement there is specific for what observation? I mean, I'm just generally saying, like, I want to.
What's the reason for that specific license? What's the rationale for having an in-training license as opposed to a provisional?
So what's the criteria for deciding on?
I think the intention behind it is for those, at least my takeaway is interns or those waiting on their license or their testing results, their scores. They're caught in a limbo. They can't get professionals. They can't do anything yet. So in training interpreter. And specifically for my agency, it was going back to they need to have already taken classes and have some mastery of the language to be able to actually work in an educational setting with a supervisor watching them and providing real time. They need to be finished with coursework. Yeah. They need to be able to pick up their hands and sign.
Samantha. I think this license is not for an observer because this does say working under supervision of of the supervisor. So they're providing interpreting services. So what you said, Christy, for example, but also I'm thinking, Sammy had mentioned about deaf interpreters. So a CODA, a SODA, or a deaf interpreter, one of those three people might have a lesser tendency to actually have gone through a formal pathway of training. And yet still, there should be some kind of minimum for interpreters to have taken. As an observer, no, not as an observer. But if you're providing actual interpreting services, you have to have a minimum. There has to be a minimum of something. Puzzle. And I'm just thinking, I wanted to second what Caitlin was talking about, maybe fewer hours, but there's got to be a minimum of 10 hours of ethics and maybe 10 to 20 hours of skill development or something. Plus a recommendation from the supervisor that, yes, I've seen enough that I'm willing to work with this person. So 10 and 10, I don't know, 20 and 10, something like that, I don't know, just putting that out there.
Aaron, I was gonna kind of do the same thing, like if we wanna not make it a barrier too high to get in, especially if, I don't know if it's barriers or not, like CODA, SODA and deaf interpreters, but maybe, I think I heard Darcy say, at least have the 10 hours of ethics and then kind of take it from there. Because it sounds like in order to get provisional, they're gonna need to have 40 hours, right? So, but at least get in the door. Maybe they at least have that basis of the 10 hours of ethics and then they can work towards those other 40, so it's not too high of a barrier to just get started.
This is Amber speaking. I'm looking over the SLI provisional license. We have 3 different pathways for provisional. One of them is just having an academic degree. Just having one. From specifically, a degree in sign language interpreting from an accredited college. So you can still get a provisional license without awaiting test scores. So I just want to, because like, I feel like there's going to be a lot of overlap between provisional and in training. So I want to make sure that we're clear. Yeah, so there's 3 different pathways. You just have an interpreting degree, you're good to go at this point for a provisional license. So we're talking about people who are still in the interpreting program for the in training, ideally, right? Like ideally speaking. So there are other pathways that, you know, if you have an EIPA 3.5 or above, et cetera, those are also other pathways. And if you've graduated, you can have a license with the signature of the supervisory licensed interpreter. So not having a test score is not a barrier to getting your provisional. I just want to make that clear.
This is Mel. Is it okay to go ahead?
Yep, go ahead.
I think this kind of comes back to me about the in-person versus remote too. So if you have a in-training interpreter and you actually have a generalist or a supervisory interpreter on the premises with you, if that in-training person is not ready, there's somebody there to take over the interpreting assignment. So that protects the consumer, that protects the deaf individual. When we look at remote, if the supervisors or the generalists Wi-Fi goes out or they crash and it's just the in-training person alone, that sets up a really sticky situation for the consumer to not be able to access the setting that they're in for whatever that setting is. So it kind of comes back to me about that, having less training, less hours in the seat. You know, if we decide to do 20 hours and 10 of ethics, still having that person in training have somebody physically close by to take over becomes more important to me. And that kind of gives a layer of protection to the consumer. That is really what I'm kind of thinking about.
Aaron, I thought, to your point though, Mel, I thought that someone who's in training, they couldn't continue with the visit if their supervisor disconnected or was sick. And so the consumer is gonna lose out.
Yeah.
No matter what, but it's because that person just wouldn't be allowed.
Right, I mean, that's in the perfect, I'm sorry, Aaron.
Oh, that's it.
I mean, that's in the perfect world, right? Like I can just imagine the consumer as well as the entity who's paying for the interpreter saying, it's okay, we're almost done. Let's just finish up. We got 2 minutes left. It's fine. I mean, it's putting a lot of responsibility on an interpreter in training to be able to say, I'm sorry, we have to stop this interaction at this point. I would like to believe people will do that, but the reality, I get curious about it. That's all. Yeah.
This is Amanda. I also was envisioning the remote, everyone was remote. So we're all on Zoom, not the situation is happening in 3D and just the supervisor is remote. I wasn't imagining that. I was imagining like we are all VRI. We're on an iPad together showing up in the classroom, or we're on an iPad together showing up in whatever. So if the technology failed on one side, the responsibility in person to be like, sorry, we have to stop is really different than like, my supervisor left, I have to end the call, right? Like those are different things. But so I wasn't envisioning a mixed methods scenario, but certainly I guess that could be a thing. But I was picturing everyone virtual or everyone in person versus
Right,
mixed.
it's just, right. I guess with my coordinating, there's a lot of variation, and sometimes the deaf person and the deaf person are in the same space, the interpreter's remote.
Yep. Yeah.
There's a lot of I mean, there'd be a lot of layers of having to unpack, yeah.
Well, this is Sammy, almost time for break, so I'm just going to go back and revisit what I think you guys have said, which is adding direct in-person supervision wherever supervision is mentioned. I think you want to add ASL proficiency. I'm not positive about that. And maybe you want to keep the 10 hours of ethics, but maybe you want to keep the 40 hours you didn't like really end on anything.
Sounds great.
So I'm not sure I got it.
However, it was a robust discussion.
It was robust, although I did like the idea of the renewal part. Like that being, you know, renew, you gotta get 40 hours of education, you can't just be, I thought that was good.
Well, we were talking about adding the ASL proficiency, meaning taking the ASL PI test. Like a minimum of what, 3.0 or a minimum of 2.5 or something like that. Well, what number would we want to set? That should be clear compared to the provisional license. I believe we said that ASL PI, or we haven't said that yet. So I'm trying to find which number that's. Here. Okay, so it says 3.5 for provisional, so maybe training could be 3.0. And then as a minimum number, we could set that as 3.0, so bar down a little bit so that people can look forward and. Ramp up with it. What do you think? Go ahead, Jamie. This is Caitlin speaking. So the ASLPI, or having taken so many years of high school ASL courses or 2 years of college ASL courses, that would be the requirement for the provisional license. I think that's the comparison there. Kind of agrees. I'll go ahead, Caitlin. And I just wanted to add English proficiency as well. It's not only ASL, but English proficiency is also a requirement there. And that's the requirement for the provisional license, which would be the equivalent of a high school degree or whatever. Degrees.
So I took the proficiencies right out of provisional because I figured that proficiency won't change. But because so no to 40 hours? And yes to 10 of ethics?
For which, the provisional, or are we talking about the in-training?
We're only talking about in-training.
Okay. Amanda, so to Sammy's question, I would propose 10 hours of ethics and 20 of processing, of skills processing, and ASL skills. That's my personal recommendation. You can see what I think about that. And then for the ASL proficiency, I'm curious if this in training is really for a CODA, SOTA, deaf interpreter person, if that's what we're talking about. You know, they could take the ASLPI there, but I'm considering if a deaf person had graduated from a deaf school, would that be enough to test their ASL skill? Would that be proficiency, as we would say, English proficiency for one who graduated from a high school? So if a person graduated from a deaf school, would we say, yes, you're proficient in ASL? Darcy says that's a good question, Christine.
I can name several students who have gone to a particular school who don't have ASL skills, and I would not consider them to be proficient upon graduation.
These are the interpreters speaking. It's time for us to switch interpreters.
We're actually ready for a break, so we'll revisit the 20 hours when we come back. Well, that's there.
How long is our break?
10 minutes, 10? 10.
For your 10 minutes.
10. Okay, and we're back. Sign language interpreter in training license. Age. 26.
26.
Bottom of 26, top of 27. 40 hours of interpreter, coursework, workshops, symposiums, maybe 20 hours instead of 40. Did you want to specify what that? I mean, we said sign language interpretation. then-
25. We have 25? Oh, yeah, no. Yeah, 25 for sign language interpreter course, for workshops, et cetera, 25 hours. And then 10 hours for ethics. Yeah, everyone agree? Okay, 3 letters, right? 3 letters of recommendation. Amanda, from
who?
From who? Caitlin says, yeah, from who, because now we don't have anything for who those letters of recommendation are from. Amanda? This is Amanda. The number of letters, it's not a question about that, but I think one of the letters should be from a supervisor, at least one should be from a supervisor, more than just a signature. There should be a letter of recommendation stating, yes, this individual is ready to proceed with training. But 3 letters, I don't know. Letters in the consumer can be the second one. Caitlin?
It's Caitlin speaking. Only concern about deaf consumer is for interpreters in rural areas. If you have the one deaf person that you have to report all the time and they don't want to write you a letter of recommendation, so I want to put that burden on.
Maybe you don't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, you're having the supervisor sign off.
So maybe you have 2, so if you're in an ITP, you have it from your instructor and the other one would be from your supervisor. You're in a rural area. Could have a couple supervisors, could have someone in the, somebody else. Like, yes, at least we need a supervisor.
What if we say something
We
like,
already have the supervisor signing the document. Saying, I'm gonna supervise, and it will has like a big box of things they have to do. So I don't know the letters of recommendation for this particular license.
That might be enough. For the in training, it's always going to be supervised. Yes, we'll have Aaron first and then.
I'm confused, so just the signature, are you saying that just the signature is enough, or are you saying you still want a letter of recommendation? Because I'm fine with just the signature, but if we want to have letter of recommendation, I just suggest one. Why make it?
Who's gonna read it and interpret it and understand it
Michael,
and care about it?
you're gonna have to set a whole bunch of standards, which you'll send over to the supervisory in general. The who, the what they're gonna do, who they are, why they're doing it, it's all the thing.
Amber?
I think for in training, the signature of a supervisor, and to Amanda, you said direct, meaning like in person every time that person does not show up to a job or anything that has them there without having their supervisor or somebody next to them on site. And I want to make that abundantly clear. And I don't recommend for virtual or the situation where to show up that the supervisor disconnects or whatever. I don't think it needs a letter of recommendation for a trainer. Just finding of a supervisor is enough. Thank you.
This is Darcy. I'm thinking at least 2 letters of recommendation, one from a certified interpreter. It is not going to be supervising. It did not sign as the one supervising, because there is a signature from the supervisor being willing to supervise, and then 2 letters of recommendation from other people. So the third person would be maybe a deaf person, which is, yes, a little bit difficult, especially if it's a rural situation. The deaf people might be stampeded for these letters of recommendations, which could be a bit tricky. So maybe that third person, we can work on that.
So if it were me, I wouldn't want to recommend somebody who's in training. I mean, that's really personally, be like, they're in training, I think you know what they know. So maybe letters of recommendation in this scenario are not necessary.
Amanda? This is Amanda, playing devil's advocate. I do agree with Sammy, and I wonder if the supervisor who signs off has already gone through screening, et cetera, so we can take them at the supervisor's word. If they are willing to put their reputation at risk for this in-training interpreter, so be it, and see how things go, because they are in training. There's very low expectations for them. So if I'm attaching my reputation to someone who's in training, that is something big. So, and I don't know how much experience they have in the community at that point. So maybe no letters of recommendation, and the supervisor just takes it all on them. They're the one taking on all the risk, signing on for that in-training interpreter. She says that works. What do you think, Darcy? I'm still thinking. It's fair.
So that's yes?
What?
Getting rid of the letters.
Yes. Strike the letter.
Okay.
I thought Darcy was okay about
Yeah.
it.
Oh, well, sure.
Yeah, I'm still thinking about it.
Yeah.
Potentially strike.
Yes, Amber?
This is Amber speaking. I have a question about a potential discrepancy. Just again, making sure that we have a clear delineation between the provisional and in-training licenses. So I'm looking over page 46. We do have a pathway 3 for education and training requiring 40 hours of education as well as English and ASL proficiency. This sounds very similar to what we already have started talking about for in-training.
That's why we reduced the number of hours.
Yeah.
This is Lori speaking.
This is Lori speaking.
Yeah, you missed part of that conversation.
For the in-training, this is Amber. I'm sorry, can
Please go ahead, Amber.
I clarify again? Because Amanda, you had mentioned that 40 hours was what, a term? So we're saying that 40 hours for provisional is sufficient for that pathway? 40. Okay. Can I continue?
40. Yes. Go ahead.
This is Amanda. Because 40 hours is the requirement for deaf interpreters. Deaf interpreters only have to take 40 hours of training and education and whatever to sit for the exam. I mean, they do need a degree as well, but it doesn't, or none of the degrees have to be. So that 40 hours, I think, is from deaf interpreter training.
Okay.
It happens to equal a term, but, or about a term.
Aaron?
I think Amber, what you missed is that Darcy suggested reducing it from 40 to 25 hours of coursework for the interpreter and training, and then 10 of ethics, if I heard that correctly. And then that's when we got onto whether or not to recommend have the letters of recommendation. So there still will be coursework required, that'll be 25 hours instead of 40.
I think this is Sandy, what Amber's saying is that you might have duplicates.
Yeah.
In provisional and in training. So,
Well, you won't if it's 25 and the other one's 40.
why would you? Okay. Yes, you can.
Amber?
This is Amber speaking. The way it is currently written does not indicate that this is designed for a deaf interpreter. And I don't really see any parameters for that, which means what is stopping an ITP student who has taken a single term of interpreting training classes to apply for their provisional at that point? Because there is nothing different.
Correct.
From that. So unless we want to revise this to add more hours or to say, specifically for deaf, I think that would be fine. Whatever you guys want to do, but I think it does need
We
clarification.
spent 6 meetings, just want to make sure everyone's on the same page, doing provisional. And 3 of them were spent doing this particular pathway. And it was all acknowledged that deaf interpreters, hearing interpreters, everybody could use a PowerPoint. So
I'm just saying
a
it needs
lot of meetings
clarification.
were spent getting there. I just want to make sure we don't redo the same thing again.
I'm just saying it needs clarification. I'm not saying let's redo it. I'm making sure that we have clear cut indication, not just in our conversation, but how it translates into the rules as people will end up reading them.
I think it's clear anybody gets to come through this pathway. Deaf, hearing, blind, everybody gets to come. Not me. So I don't know how do you make that clearer, an applicant?
Caitlin?
This is Caitlin speaking. All that time we spent on the provisional license was before SB 950, which gave us this in-training license. So deaf interpreters would qualify for an in-training license. As of now, there is no limit on renewals. Just trying to work it through in my head. Because I totally agree with what you're saying. If we're given 40 hours and say that's good enough compared to this. So after 1 year-ish of the in-training license, you can automatically bump up to a provisional license, which means no on-site supervision.
And Amanda? This is Amanda. However, you still need supervision. Maybe not on-site direct, but you still need supervision and you need to have someone who's willing to supervise you. So there is a vetting process and the supervising interpreter has to be willing to lend their reputation to the provisional. So the 40 hours of training applies to everyone. And yes, it could do that. The safeguard is the supervision part. Who's going to accept me as someone they're going to supervise?
This is Heather. There's no automatic advancement. An applicant needs to apply for each different licensure and can come in at any licensure level without having had it.
Sorry, Heather, for the interpreter, could you speak up, please?
Yes. So this is Heather. So there's no automatic bumping up. A person has to apply for each individual license and qualify for those individual licenses. And you don't necessarily need to have another license unless it's stated in a rule to get a particular license. So a person could come in at a generalist, person could come in at the provisional. They don't necessarily need to hold a different level of licensure before those. So just remember those things.
We're gonna take a moment to switch. This is Darcy. Darcy speaking. So related to the in-training situation, so that interpreter, we've talked about, 40 hours, whatever, or 10 hours of ethics, I'm not sure if she keep that, but the whole 40 hours, we keep changing that. So I'm thinking as another point of reference, I mean, student going into an interpreting program, going through that process, maybe they have, for example, they've gone through the interpreting program and they're like, oh, I want to see what it would be like. Maybe Coda goes into an interpreting program, kind of doesn't want to do the interpreting program, doesn't think that they need to do that, and goes ahead and does, takes some, in training license and tries to do some work, but they only went to the interpreting program for one term, one short little round of coursework. Maybe it was 25 hours, maybe it was 40 hours. And then they dropped the program and started a community with their training license.
Supervisor.
So, I mean, they've already done the, little bit of work, the 25 hours they need. So I'm just wondering, what happens if that situation were to come up? Is there a pathway for that person? I could see that happening potentially. The second thing I wanted to bring up was also, out there in the world, there's lots of workshops and trainings and whatnot. So there's that instead of the interpreting program. So, no. So do we keep the 40 hours considering those things? Or do we not?
For in training, Amanda says?
Yes, for the in-training.
I guess I tried to grasp why
40 hours is a bad idea. If we want them to be able to come in, pick up their hands. I'm having a hard time understanding why that wouldn't be accepted.
Do you mean
For the
keeping the 48 hours?
Yeah. Like, why not just go ahead and accept it?
Right, that's yeah, that's my thought too. I mean, 25 is not very much. 40 hours seems reasonable.
I want committed, skilled, right? We're gonna pick up more.
This is Caitlin. So maybe we put into the supervisor rules, like when to know to use discretion for whether your person should require direct on-site interpreting in the first phase. No, I think they've gone to a point where I don't feel like I have to be there supervising them in person the whole time. So you need to put something on the supervisor's part to say, what do you think? That feels weird giving them.
Randy says no. This is Amanda. What I'm realizing, we're talking about the 40 hours of in training. I think we need to keep the 40 hours of training. I think that person is gonna not be able to apply for the supervisory license if they don't have that anyway. So keep the 40 hours of training and then up the provisional to something else. But I think keeping 40 hours is fine and then we increase the provisional because having them the same doesn't really make a lot of sense. So why not just go ahead, just have them, otherwise you just go straight to provisional. So Darcy says, so with provisional, you have the requirement of the written test. No, you don't.
No, because the plan is for 40 hours and the English and ASL, that's on the second pathway.
Oh, okay.
So you want to up this part here? I think that's fine.
So this is provisional?
Provisional. So that's the rationale there.
This is Amber speaking. At what point, and this is a great question for anybody who are interpreter trainers. At what point do we start offering opportunities in the ITP program, interpreter training program, for students to start interpreting? And where, like, let's make sure that this is like research based, right? So for me in my program, I didn't do any hands-up actual interpreting until my second year. So I'm that's just my like experience personally. So like if we can align it with what is already being practiced in the programs, because if there's already, and I don't know about this, so I'm asking the collective, at what point are interpreter training programs encouraging there to be actual interpreting practice after having interpreter theory being taught, after having taught all these other things? At what point do we start actually practicing the interpreting within the interpreting program?
This is Darcy. Typically, it's sort of the 5th or 6th term of the program, so it's that second year. So it's the 5th or 6th term. Understand like some programs have sort of screening and vetting process to see if an interpreter is ready to do that, be placed with an internship, where they have direct supervision the whole time. However, some students don't pass the screening process. And it is one part of, they have to wait till the next term, the 6th term, and maybe they're ready by that point, or maybe the 7th term, maybe they're ready. It really depends on their skill level at that time. So there is a vetting process. Also for the 2-year interpreting programs like at the colleges, so that's typically how it's set up.
This is Amanda. I would say I agree with what Darcy said. And at the same time, there's a lot of variation because it really depends on what we're talking about. If we're talking about volunteer jobs, interpreting for my son's birthday party or something like that, sometimes we will go ahead and offer that service to someone who's maybe in their junior year still, who looks like they could probably handle it. Looks like they're pretty good at just making decisions, and they'll go with somebody. It's a pretty low risk scenario. And so the standards of research, there aren't any in that department, but I would say, generally, I would say it's the same. And in our program is what Darcy said. You've got the translation, the process of theory, blah, 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 with all the coursework. And then for the first year, and then around in the second year-ish, that's about when we would say we would place a student.
So says Darcy, yeah, so a lot of it's like interpreting in class, right?
Yes,
A lot of
in
the practice stuff that first year, but you don't get out in the real world with an actual
people.
client for that second year, it's like your semester.
Yeah.
And there says the other reason is some accountability, for that person. Liability.
Yes.
Because the students being placed in, these other settings, they have a liability there. Compared with other pathways, like a deaf interpreter, a CODA, SODA, there is none of that liability. So, they could be working with an interpreter, supervisor interpreter, and that might have to be where that comes in. So I'll have to consider those things as well.
So if we decide on 40 for the sign language interpreter and trainee, does that mean we up the one for provisional? And then does that mean we also have to increase it for hours for the generalist and the supervisor? Like, do we have to bump all of them up because of that? Or I don't know if the generalist has something.
Yeah. No.
Okay, so we could, am I hearing that we want to keep the 40? Because it sounds like that's minimum, like by the time they're actually interpreting, the client won't be till much later, so they have more than 40 anyway. And then we want to then increase the provisional to a higher amount. And what would that be? Hours would that be? Because that means they're still they're interpreting, but then they're under supervision, but not like physically with them.
This is Darcy. So after a 2-year, your sort of program ready to interpret, you probably have 100 to 140-ish hours under your belt of theory and process and practice ish. So I'd say 140, 150-ish, depending on the individual program, because I know they're going to vary some. So again, does that satisfy one of the pathways? I don't know. I mean, you've got to sort of get out there and you got to, the other pathways, you got to get out there, you start taking on classes and workshops. You got to be pretty aggressive in getting those things, but it is another pathway. But I think bumping it up is not a bad idea. So the training the training 140 and then maybe provisional is 120 or above, 100 something.
Yeah, I think so. You want to go first, Amber? I'm just thinking, I think I heard someone say though, that in testimony, the reason why they put that 40 was for the deaf interpreter. And so would increasing to 120 then make it harder for deaf interpreters to get in, or is there a different pathway where they could get in? I just don't know.
Well, yeah, deaf interpreters, yeah. It's the limiting. This is That's exactly my point about the needing more clarification about the specific pathways. Because if we want to go ahead and open things up for deaf interpreters, that's great, and I totally support that, and I really want that. That's awesome, but again, I'm needing more deaf interpreters. However, if we have the 3 different pathways we have the provisional, and then the first pathway says you have finished an interpreting program, an ITP, and you have your degree in hand. But now you just said like 140 hours, 150 hours for that. So, and a deaf interpreter only has to do 40 hours. So, I mean, where's the equivalency in that? So I feel like we really need some more clarification. So if we want to have, make sure that is open for deaf interpreters, I think it's gonna really impact deaf interpreters to do that. So I guess my point is, if someone, so if you have a hearing person, my perspective, doesn't matter if we CODA, blah, 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 CODA, SODA, so we're not including those. If you have a hearing interpreter who grew up in an English-speaking environment, English is their first language, they went through the ITP, they graduated, as one back. So deaf needs some sort of equivalent. So we need to provide some sort of pathway so that they all are equivalent. And we need an accessible for everybody. So I don't really feel right now that it's equivalent because the provisional license only has the one license, the one provisional, one thing, right? So what are the standard requirements for all three pathways? It should be the same. Except for the deaf interpretation. We're not talking about that. We're not, that's totally separate.
Separate. It's very important. That's how it's written. So if we undo that, then we're undoing it. So I just want it to be clear that the way the bill is written, it's everybody. Everybody has to have a license unless you're exempt. And the exemptions are very specific.
We're actually gonna pause and switch to those.
Go ahead, Mel.
So granted, I'm in remote land and my ADD tracking isn't the best. I'm just gonna say that. So I wanted to understand the equivalency and so as they're trying to get clarification around how many hours of training for the deaf interpreters compared to hearing interpreters. So if we back it up a step, they're not equivalent because deaf individuals have been a marginalized community for years and don't have equal access to education and training. There's so many less resources available to them. So we have to remember the context. Nothing is equal in a society like how we have it, right? So yes, it's going to look different for some, but there's also that pathway that many interpreters want to go through because it has financial aid available to it. It has funding available to it. So there's a lot of different variables that we consider. If somebody's taking 40 hours of training, that's out of their own pocket potentially, if they're not in an ITP that has federal support or, student loan support. Maybe I'm off topic and I missed a second there. But I still want to have that pathway for how it's written.
Go ahead.
Saving. Okay. This is a lot of thoughts, so I'm going to get them out as clearly as I can. When I came up with that pathway for deaf interpreters theoretically for the provisional license, that was before SB 950. Now we have the in-training license, which a deaf interpreter could qualify for. And there's no renewal. Theoretically, deaf interpreter could go through that pathway in order to jump up to getting 40 hours or the 120 hours for provisional licensing. Do I love the idea of a super qualified deaf interpreter needing on-site supervision? No. And I think it could be possible.
I'm just checking off the list. This is Amanda. So I agree with you, Caitlin, because now, so before we had the 3 pathways, now we have a 4th one, which is in training. So, and that's open to everyone who wants to become an interpreter. So that minimum of 40 hours, et cetera, that's there. Next license being provisional is different. And because it's an independent interpreter, so that's gonna work differently. So the hours should be raised up a little bit, up to 120, I would say, maybe, because, you know, you're right, there are different pathways of experience and things are going to count credit-wise and hour-wise in each of the pathways, but I would say up to 120, maybe 60, maybe 80, maybe 90, I don't know, something in that range. And that still allows for that, but that pathway is to be available for everyone. And how we're going to protect our clients, how we're going to protect our community and our profession through the complaint process, through supervision, through responsibility, and through,
And not through closing the gates.
so we want to make sure that people can become interpreters. And that means that it's for everyone, because for my bias is that interpreting is interpreting, so if you're deaf or hearing, it doesn't matter. You know, if it's defined as X, it's X for everyone. So it's not defined by your hearing test. It's written by the basic of what it is. An interpreter is all of it. And how we reach that might be in a different way, but the baseline is that that's the requirement. And that's fine.
This is Mel. Am I clear to go, Darcy?
Yes, go ahead.
I also just want to pause and take a second to recognize that we are yet again trying to fit deaf interpreters into our hearing system. And by doing so, we are causing potential harm to the community we work with and serve, right? We are working around and tap dancing around having a clear, respectable pathway for valued interpreters because we're trying to fit them in a system that was not designed for them. It was designed for hearing interpreters. I just want to call that out clearly. And we are using language and talking about things that for me feel really disgusting and disrespectful. In no way, and Darcy, I don't mean to call you out, do I want to have Darcy show up on a job with a prior student having to be their supervisor. It's so disrespectful. It's just, it doesn't feel good. And so we're trying to figure this out in a way that to me potentially sets up a power differential that can have lasting harm to our community. There's what's on paper, and then there's what's actually happening when we're out there doing the work, right? And so I get it, but I just want to call it out again and remind ourselves why this doesn't feel good.
This is Amber speaking. Mel, that's exactly the point that I was trying to make, is that there are not as many opportunities for deaf interpreters to access the same things as hearing interpreters. And I think to Amanda's point is, if I may, I think what she's talking about is an opportunity for universal design, which we always want to have universal design so that people can access it at any given level. And also, there aren't as many opportunities for deaf interpreters to get the same educational opportunities as hearing interpreters who have robust interpreter training programs. And maybe those are specifically designed for hearing interpreters. So when I'm talking about the fact that there needs to be delineation in this 40 hours, I'm saying that we need to support our deaf interpreters. I don't know if that came through during my message before, but I specifically stated that we need to make sure that those doors are open. So I don't know where there may have been a miscommunication, but I think it's important that we continue to be curious as we go forward and make sure that we're clarifying what we're understanding. That's all. Thank you.
This is Amanda. I'm confused. I think that we are at a narrative level and we're all picturing something really different, because I in no way imagine Darcy needing a supervisor to serve as a deaf interpreter. So I'm thinking of people who are new to being deaf interpreters going through the training process, the sign language interpreters in training. So can you help me understand, Mel, what you're talking about when you say that we're going to unqualified people who are qualified in some way, shape, or form, or that somebody less experienced would have to serve as their supervisor. I'm not seeing that.
I have to think about it, Amanda.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm just wanting to be thoughtful about this process and making sure when we start saying words like equal, it's not equal. Equitable, it's not equitable, right? And understanding that the training opportunities for people are really different. And how people come into this profession is really different.
Yeah.
Creating the least obstacles to make sure that we have quality interpreters to safeguard is paramount, absolutely. And I recognize that there can be interpreters out there who are deaf that also need to have the training, absolutely. I think part of this is also creating those trainings and pathways for more interpreters. I'm just frustrated.
I see that. And this is Amanda. I appreciate that, Mel. And I see the frustration. I think, you know, words like equal or equity or those kinds of things. My point is, if we have a standard, we have a standard, and the standard is the standard. And how you get to that standard is different, right? That's the pathways, right? There's all kinds of pathways to get there. So I think that's where we need to be having the conversation of like, this is what it means to be an interpreter. Yeah, baseline competency. That's what it means to be an interpreter. How you show that, how you demonstrate that, absolutely. It can look all kinds of different ways, but this is what it is. So whether that is linguistic skill, whether that is a particular ethics line, whether that is a particular skill set that we've quantified in hours. I don't know how other professions do that, if they have other ways of demonstrating that through a test. I mean, we have tests too, I guess that's true, but I think the standard needs to be the same. And then, like you said, opportunities. And I think it's similar to what we've talked about in the past about like supply and demand, right? Once we've created the demand that this is the standard, then trainings and workshops will present themselves to supply that demand of people need to get to this level. So, you know, the early days might be messy. They already are. But yeah. So thanks for, I miss you, Mel, being in person.
This is Lori, and I think the people in this room recognize that Pathway 3 was largely intended for deaf interpreters, but it needs to be applied to everyone, which is where people are struggling, I think, because the qualifications for that, for a hearing interpreter, do not match those of the other pathways. So my opinion is that we need to trust the supervisory process for those people and know that if they are unqualified based on the 40 hours, whatever number of hours are ultimately decided, that they will be gone. That's my take.
Do we want to do lunch? That's right. Now it's fine.
Maybe this is a little off topic, but one other topic to bring up is that a few of us have mentioned related to supervision of deaf interpreters, the training for original licenses have supervisors in both of them. So it does get a little bit sticky because no matter if the person is an experienced or not experienced person, it doesn't really matter. The point being, you know, and the sticky part becomes when you're talking with some hearing interpreters, they'll say, oh, well, why is this? And then they might get some feedback and say, oh, it's fine, which is very scary because they're
Often hearing interpreters are very reluctant to provide feedback to deaf interpreters. There's that dynamic there. A lot of hearing interpreters do not feel qualified or comfortable to provide any feedback to a deaf interpreter, no matter how new that interpreter might be, that deaf interpreter, whether the deaf interpreter is brand new or seasoned. Hearing interpreters do not feel like it's appropriate to provide that feedback. And that can be frustrating for deaf interpreters. As a deaf interpreter, I feel frustrated by that because it's difficult to improve my skills. I'm able to improve my skills, but it's difficult to without as much feedback as other hearing interpreters might get.
And it doesn't happen often where deaf interpreters are working with each other, where you would have a team of 2 hearing and 2 deaf interpreters. It's very rare to get that kind of teaming and then get quality feedback. So compared to, out on the East Coast, with this much larger community of deaf interpreters, where they're all very supportive of each other, here on the West Coast, it's a very small community and much more limited opportunities. So, where the supervisor support is going to come from out here in the West compared to other places is somewhat unknown, but I think so, several hearing interpreters who are willing to sign up as supervisors, I don't really know how they would honestly provide great feedback. Regardless of if they sign their name on a form, what's it really gonna look like? So the point here, and maybe now you're feeling disgruntled or at odds with this discussion, I think Amanda too, and I think I am in agreement with you to some degree about this and
I think it's also important to be aware that that dynamic is there as well. It's something at the topic we will need to think about, whether more training needs to be provided to hearing interpreters or perhaps bringing in outside support to develop that particular need that we have in Oregon. Something we need to think about and be prepared to discuss later. And if you take this moment to switch interpreters.
So I'm going to suggest you real quick, just before we switch, there's a few, the CDIs in Oregon. I think what they're supporting us. This is for. That's for the, the whole area. So Portland has maybe, we'll say 6, 7, 8 maybe in deaf interpreters. And we've got people who are motivated up there, but again, where are you gonna do the supervision? Because there's no hearing interpreters, no one to do that. So the opportunity is less. So where are we gonna get this opportunity? Where is that equity coming in? So you have the CDIs are all busy. So there's not a lot of time, there's not a lot of attention to supervision work. And
it's all working.
I just realized we're getting copies.
Right, hold on, please.
My point is, the CDIs that we have in Oregon made it through without supervision. They came to where they are now without supervision, which that is common practice throughout the United States. Something to think about. I missed mine. I didn't see my lunch was there. Yes, Christine.
Are we taking lunch at this time or? Up to you guys.
I have one
Mention Lori.
comment about what you just said. I think that the people you're describing can apply for the general license. Under pathway 3. And no supervision.
They need to be certified,
Not for
correct, to get into the journalist?
experience. 55.
Amber, sorry, Lori, what was your question about page 55?
There was no question. I was just saying that the people that she's describing, I think will qualify for the generalist license. So we don't have to be concerned about the supervision.
Okay, yeah. Starcy, yes, I recently renewed my license for generalist and it was turned down. But Amanda explained that was because it's under the old rules, so, okay. Amanda?
This is Amanda. I was just gonna say, Lori, I think you're, I mean, obviously we just looked, you're right. But we did that on purpose, so that in training means actually in training people, deaf hearing regardless. Provisional means provisional hearing deaf regardless. Generalist has a pathway for qualified, experienced deaf interpreters to have generalists, but unfortunately it's not adopted yet. Will be, hopefully, if the board accepts it.
Okay, I feel like we've solved the world's problems.
So, Sammy, before we go to lunch, I just wanted to do that. We're gonna do 40 hours of. Never really, no pressure on that, so nothing was accomplished. But I know. of.
So how many hours for in training license? 40. Also 40 for provisional?
Yeah, this is, yeah, there was no answer.
I think we need to up for the provisional.
This year.
200?
80, Amanda says? What do you think, Darcy? 100, 120? Darcy's 80. Maybe we can start with the 80 and see how it goes. Aaron?
It's Aaron, so to make sure I understand, we're no longer concerned about deaf interpreters, that there being too many barriers for completing hours of coursework for deaf interpreters by increasing those numbers because we feel that there are other pathways through the generalists that will allow them to get in without having to meet those hours. Is that correct?
Still thinking about it. We're still considering it.
Maybe what this is Sammy, maybe what we need to think about is, even though 950 is new, at one point, that's in several meetings, you guys said that 40 hours was a pathway that people would have, that was qualified enough if they did the other things to get a provisional license. Has that changed just because of the new license? I'm assuming no. They were qualified over here.
I think the reason why, this is Aaron, I think the reason why it's changed is because the interpreter in training license didn't exist.
Right.
And so that's why they created the 40. So it's like provisional is now a step above training, so.
But at one time it was enough to work without supervision, without on-site in person. Right. That shouldn't have changed. So maybe what you need to do is lower your in training. Because over here, you said, you guys went through many meetings, decided that 40 was the number. So maybe this needs to be lower. Unless this actually literally changed, not just.
Caitlin?
This is Caitlin. The in training was added and the settings limitations were removed from provisional. So now provisional can go anywhere. And before they could only go into very low risk settings, college classrooms, public events, not into medical settings or legal proceedings or education. So that's the other part.
Okay. And so I think we just original altogether. And from the settings standpoint. I just.
This is Amanda. This is Amanda. I think the other difference is the supervision. So maybe being required to get, those licenses might be the same, might have similar requirements, 40 hours each maybe, but one requires constant supervision and the other one allows for a more distant supervision. So maybe that is the delineation and that's okay. Erin?
This is Erin. So if you were to supervise someone, people in this room who would supervise people in those different positions, do you feel good about that? Like, would you want to supervise someone indirectly who hasn't done more than 40 hours since their interpreter in training? Or would you think, oh, I'm not gonna take that person on because they actually need more hours? So then will that lead to people not getting supervised because they're like, you actually need more, even though the law says you only need this minimum amount?
Heather.
This is Heather. So for the provisional, it doesn't mean that you can't provide direct supervision. This means that you can also provide remote, right? Because that supervisor can decide what type of supervision, unless you have it differently in the rules. The statutes don't say that you can't provide direct supervision to a provisional if that particular person needs direct. So just.
Amanda? Amanda, also, I think we need to remember that we want to have the widest net possible. Because we don't know the numbers yet. We don't know how many people will use a particular pathway. If only 4 people are using this pathway, then okay. We'll have 4 supervisors that are willing to take on those 4. But if we get 1,000 candidates deciding to take that pathway, wow, that becomes a different issue. Most interpreters, most interpreters will follow the first 2 pathways. Third pathway should be rare. It should be a small number of applicants. Maybe we can trust the process, trust the supervisory process, and collect data. And then make adjustments, make changes to the rules as needed. We need to do that anyway, right? Every certain number of years, we review the rules. And, yeah, every 2 years. Amber?
This is Amber. Yeah, I think if we assimilate it to like medical profession, right? You want to have somebody who's in training, having somebody there teaching you how to put an IV in. But once you've done it X amount of times, okay, you can do it on your own, but I'm going to be in the other room. The same thing applies for when you go into provisional. So you've done it a few times, so now I'll be over here if you need me, kind of thing. The other thing that I wanted to say too is a concern for our provisional folks, in that they will not be able to apply and get their provisional license until they have somebody who is supervisory to sign it. That being said, I have heard community concerns regarding our provisional folks having those doors closed to them when our enforcements start, because there's going to be a process to make sure that there are supervisory interpreters, supervisory license holders available. So I'm wondering, and I don't know how on agenda this is, but I just wanted to make sure it got brought up. But we need to actually have supervisory license interpreters for provisional interpreters to get their license. So when we start to actually roll all of that out, I wonder if we can like hold a little bit longer for provisionally licensed applicants to be required to apply, because there's not going to be any supervisory licensed interpreters that are required at the same time, if that makes any sense. Like you can't apply without a supervisory license. It's all going to come flooding in at the same time. All these people are like provisional applicants won't be able to
200 supervisors right now and about 100 generalists.
How many provisional?
200 supervisors provisional.
How many provisional?
Sorry, I'm not following.
Right now, there's about 200 supervisors and about 100 generalists.
Heather?
Caitlin had mentioned this, but I want to reiterate that currently, the generalists can also supervise. So that will end at some point in the future, but currently there's that pool to carry the supervision weight too.
Until when?
2030.
Generalists will supervise until 2030.
Yes, that was put into the original statute. And then that's reiterated in the rules. Correct.
for supervision. So that only applies, this is Amber speaking, that only applies people who already have their generalist license. We're not talking about people who are applying today, correct? Because of SB 950.
So I'm gonna rephrase your question as I think I heard it. Yeah. So anyone who today has a generalist or supervisory license right now and before the 1st of January, they can provide supervision to any person who has a provisional license. That does not change starting January 1st. January 1st, if rules are adopted and there are different requirements for obtaining those licenses, people have to fit those different requirements for obtaining a license, but that supervision of provisional license holders does not change that it's a generalist or supervisory license holder who can provide supervision of provisional up until that 2030 date.
Amanda? This is Amanda. How many provisional license holders do we have, or applicants?
0.
0.
We're good. Oh, no, I'm sorry, 16.
Oh,
It was 0.
We're good.
This is the interpreters, we're gonna go ahead and switch, and might I advocate for a lunch break?
Yes, I would also like to advocate for your lunch break as well.
15 minutes for lunch. Okay. Amy, so back to being sick, top of 27. 40 hours. The 40 hours of education and training. Yeah, some consensus. Very.
Caitlin?
Caitlin,
I
I'm sorry,
believe,
one moment. One moment. Am I standing or, thank you.
I believe that A and B, as written. I don't think they need to be tweaked anymore. I think we've made those decisions and had those conversations. Let's go ahead and leave it.
Is that
And get
consensus?
rid of C.
Okay.
So the 2-3 letters of recommendation, we're getting rid of that, right? As Amber's saying.
Correct.
Darcy?
Recommend that we cross it out.
The 3 letters of recommendation, need to be. Seems like there's consensus in the room. Lots of things.
And I'm sticking with English proficiency and ASL proficiency. For the sign language interpreter license. Sorry. Still want the addition of ASL.
This is, I think we want to keep ASL, but then kind of bump down the ASLPI to a 3.0.
3.0 for the ASLPI, is that right? That's what
Yeah.
we're adding?
This is Darcy, yes, yeah, the 3.0. And the other one, provisional.
This is Amber speaking. I'm wondering if we could also include
I'm starting to backtrack on my own recommendation, but like possibly including like the acceptance letter of an ITP program.
Scale thinking as an option, not as a requirement.
As an option, yeah, so having an option for ASLPI 3.0 or higher, and also ITP, because the two ITP training programs in the state of Oregon are vetting their applicants for ASL proficiency tests.
So for ASL proficiency, we're saying SLPI 3.0 or the ASL classes taken or an acceptance letter to an ITP.
This is Darcy. I want to throw out there too, so imagine that most of our students who start a program, maybe they don't pass with a 3.0.
I couldn't pass it.
So 3.0, so probably a few people will, but all of them are not going to be able to pass at that level. They're going to be like a 2.5, maybe something, maybe a 3, so I mean, yes, they're going to develop, some are going to develop very quickly, others are not. So I suppose if we set it a 3.0 for the for those of our interesting students as a requirement of 3.0 for the SLPI. Therefore, we're not screening at a minimum. Having a minimum skill level should be in signing should be like a 2 point or something to get into. So I don't know that a 3 is quite where we want it to be. That's been my experience working.
Is that ASLPI trainer, that's trainer, an interview, I have experience with that.
So having it at that level, maybe just dropping it down just a touch.
What's a C level grade?
I'm sorry, Sandy.
C.
What's a C level grade? That's what you have for the other two options. At least C.
So this is, Amanda, a C would be maybe a, well, I don't know, what would it be,
Equivalent.
4? Or, what do you think, what are your classes? What's a C in your class? A 2 point something? Yeah, I don't know, this starts, probably a 3 or above would be, no, let's see, hold on. The 1 plus 2, 2 plus 3, 3. So maybe, I don't know, like a general would be a 5, and then the goal, the top is the level, the top is a 5. Okay, this is imagine. So imagine a student who's finished your program, they finished all the classes, they've taken everything they need. So do you give them a C grade? If that's equivalent to what? 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Oh gosh, this is tricky. Maybe a 2.0, 2.5? And it depends, I suppose. How they're, settings, what their settings are like.
Okay, so 2.5 maybe we should pay 2.5 then.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Yeah. Darcy, if you've got a deaf person who takes the signing proficiency, and does well and has a good, a good foundation, I think a 3.0 is perfectly reasonable. A hearing interpreter, grade student who's still on their path of learning, or maybe a code too, be like a 3 point, or maybe their skills really aren't as good as they need to be, and
Figure something's not as good.
so maybe we can structure something a little bit different, like so the English and have the ASL be different. I don't know. Just kind of thinking about it. There's my
Point is that there should be a no.
yes. Remember speaking. I want to say that Bridges, Oregon, they have a video showing the different levels. They have those samples, so you can watch that to see like, okay, kind of get a feel for what a 2.0 looks like or a 3.0 looks like. I mean, it's on their website. Bridges is under what? Is that the SLPI? See, SLPI, that is different test. ASLPI versus SLPI. So which, they're not equivalent. So how do you
how do you match up apples to oranges? This is Amber speaking. We are willing to accept either test, correct?
I don't know, you guys told me. Yeah, I'm here.
Yes.
Having obtained one of the following, score of intermediate or above on the SLPI, or score of at least right now is 3.5 or above on ASLPI.
And that's for the generalist?
That's for provisional.
Sorry, for what?
For a provisional, for fluency in ASL.
Sorry, we were talking over each other. Sorry.
I thought we were talking, Erin, I thought we were talking about sign language or in training. Did we move on?
No, we're in training.
That was an example.
And so I don't know what you want this letter from the interpreter education programs.
What letter?
Oh,
that one, the for
letter.
What? As a pathway, this Caitlin speaking, as a pathway to improve ASL efficiency.
Yeah, I understand that, but I don't know what are you submitting?
The letter.
The
of
acceptance
acceptance.
letter. What is in the letter? Like if
The letter says, congrats, you're accepted in
Yeah.
this interpreting program.
Okay,
Are you familiar with an acceptance letter?
I'm absolutely, but if you were to go look at the other letters in different license, it's not quite that simple, but I feel.
Can we say again? This is Darcy speaking. So a student that gets into an interpreting program, they don't have any coursework, they don't have any interpreting experience, so how would an acceptance letter be? Yeah, it's totally a different thing. So ASL skills is one qualification, but I don't know how this person finds, they just got into the program.
They wouldn't have any experience in interpreting it. Or interpreting the parts of it again.
This is Caitlin. I guess it's just one way to show some skill, either ASLPI or SLPI or a program acceptance. I mean, you're still required to do the coursework and everything else, but it's just one way to prove proficiency. I don't know, your guys' thoughts? Amber?
Really the goal.
Really, the goal about all this too is because interpreters are trying to apply to an ITP, they're required to take they're not required to take the SLPI. So why are we adding more requirements onto them? More requirements, don't add more requirements to the application process. So that's the goal behind my suggestion. It was just an idea. I'm just throwing it out there. Doesn't, you guys want to accept it? Just putting it out there. Interpreters are gonna take it.
Okay. Did we add a letter of acceptance from the interpreter education program? Are we adding that?
No comment. This is the method. Under 9, would you add it under 9 or 7?
Let me use English, this is Amanda.
I was under the impression it's going under ASL proficiency.
Right, which number is that in yours now? A 9, or did you put it above
It would
English
be right after
proficiency?
English.
Should be. Okay.
Which page are you on? Which page are you on?
It would be page, well, yeah, I've added it, so. I don't have it on the page. It's, on page,
27, end of 27.
no, there's not, that's English version.
Yeah, but didn't you add it right after?
But we don't have that copy.
Right, no, that's why I was asking you. You added it as 9, right?
Yeah, I thought that Darcy was asking me where she would find the ASL proficiency. Is that not what she's asking?
I could be confusing things.
Because if that's what she's asking, it's on page 46. Yeah, bottom of page 47, and top of page 48. And so it would become top of page 48. Little c, big C. And so here is what I think will happen if I read this like this.
She's just looking at the wording now that you pointed out, 47 and 48.
Is you're gonna get a letter on a white piece of paper from a student who's in an IT program because you've given them no parameters about what this letter is supposed to look like, or one from China, TP in China. We gotta give the person who's applying a little bit of direction, or we're not helping get anywhere. You know what I'm saying? Like, is this in Oregon? Is it from a professor? We're assuming that there's always an acceptance letter, assuming new rules.
If I recommend if the point is, an acceptance letter from,
The chair of an interpreting program,
so a chair
Or
or
a sign language
sign language interpreter. And that could be from anywhere, someone who is in charge of an interpreting program, they could write the letter, on their college, header paper.
Letterhead.
And, it'll say Louisville College, Western Oregon, PCC, or whatever, and that can be shown as the ability there. It's signed.
as part of chair.
by the department.
I don't work for college, but that seems like a real.
It's not,
When you get
You
an
write-
acceptance from a college, either in an email or on a letter, that's not okay to use that?
That is what she said. That's the same thing.
yeah, when we accept students, we do write
From
that
there?
from the chair, and that's, and our secretary is, yeah, I'll put that out there, they do the typing and we do the signing and we send the letters out to the, those who are accepted, so it's a written letter and all the names are on there, the students' name is on there, everything's signed, so.
Secretaries do all the work.
Yes, they're so wonderful, we could not live without a secretary. Go ahead, Mary.
And if for some reason that doesn't satisfy, faculty are used to writing letters for students on letterhead for financial aid, or verify this, like it's not.
Are these only the Oregon? Does the other states? Any?
Oh, for any state, yeah, from any state, it wouldn't matter. Yeah, if a person outside, of Washington State, similarly, if they had something signed from an interpreter program anywhere, I think that would be.
And are there interpreter programs that aren't sign language, or could there be something that was a Spanish interpreter, or is it always, no matter what, everywhere in the globe, interpreter? Sign.
I thought you said sign language interpreting. You?
Yes,
Yes.
I think
So
that,
it specifies sign language interpreting.
What?
accredited.
The letter of acceptance to a sign language interpreting program.
And it can be trilingual, right? Is Texas? I think Texas is one place that has a trilingual ASL English and Spanish program, so that's the only one I know of. But that would be acceptable as well, at least in the United States. That's the one trilingual program. most of the other ones, or all the other ones that we know of are sign language.
Any other? Okay. 28 is the renewal. It's a 1-year renewal.
I'm thinking, so is this where if we want to include how many teaching education hours, we would put it in here?
On page 30, I copied in what Harrison talked about 2 meetings ago, which it was 2020, but since they're 1-year renewals, I put 10 to 10. But you guys can change that. Or 10 to 10, not 2. But yeah, where you would add it.
Erin, this is Erin. Before we do that, just something really quick. Under on page 28, under 3, little d, name of current supervisor, since there could be more than one, I want to put the S in parentheses after name and supervisor. Could you repeat what you said before, what you listed? This is Caitlin, I was just asking, page 27, 28, we could come down to how many hours are required for continuing, for renewal.
But Sammy said it's on page 30.
Yeah, the references it. On page 28, 3, little b. And then little b is on page 30.
Erin, so total number of supervised hours completed during the previous renewal cycle, what is the how many hours are expected? We haven't decided that yet. What do you think?
Or maybe it's not a number, just whatever it was.
Oh, yeah, so it doesn't matter.
Maybe not.
Amanda?
I'm thinking just generally it doesn't matter because if someone is pursuing a full-time and as a full-time interpreter, maybe it's 100 hours, but someone who's doing a little bit at a time, maybe 20 hours, it could still be fine for both of those people to be in training. I don't think we need a minimum number of hours there. What do you think? I think really could just put down what it is.
There.
Do you even want them to submit that? Yeah. Is it relevant to renewal?
We do need to be with it. Chill with it.
This is Amanda. I always want data. That feels like fun data. So right, but like, could the board get that data? Can the RAC get that data? Could somebody doing a research project get that data if you housed it? Because I think that would give insight into future rule changes, potentially, if we knew how many hours people were doing or not doing, or what they needed, what they didn't need, like that does feel like important data to have. I don't know. I like data.
I know for other programs, when we would track numbers, it's when you set a specific number, right? 120 hours in a temporary hearing aid will get you to permanent hearing aid. So we're gonna track your 120. That's what I know. We do it in other programs.
And this is
Same with
Lori, and I guess a piece of information that we don't necessarily know the answer to is whether that information would be easily retrievable, or is it on a piece of paper that's among all of the pieces of paper and somebody would physically have to pull that out, right?
Don't we have something in the supervisory, this is Amanda, sorry. Don't we have something in the supervisory one where they have to track hours? Because maybe it's not data that you all need, but they should be tracking their hours. Is that something we require in supervision, whatever that one's called? Did we have something about tracking? I think so.
I think you guys do that.
So maybe that's sufficient, is my point. If we had it somewhere that people were tracking.
Maybe we could say, keep this simple and just say generally under the supervisory, there's a minimum, I think it was.
Provisional
For
was.
provisional, there was a minimum of like 10 hours of supervision, and there's like 2 or 3 different settings. So one is like a minimum of 10 hours. It seems reasonable for, over the course of a year, that should be bumped up. And for a deaf interpreter, maybe there's more like 10 hours of interpreting, simple like that. And then for another hearing interpreter, I would assume you would have more hours there to kind of balance that out, but both people in training and the supervisors will have to submit their hours and they'll have to match. The amount of hours will have to match. And then it's be submitted as approved to complete those requirements. And that they would have to be agreed upon that yes, we did do these hours. And then
Nobody's gonna do that.
No.
Nobody's gonna compare them and do that math.
It'll be his time.
So HLO is not.
Okay, so, okay.
No, we're not gonna look at their training.
So how do you follow with other for certifications? How do you follow those requirements and how do you track?
Well, if there's a set number of hours, like hearing aid has 120 hours, then they would submit that and the supervisor would sign off. But there is no set number of hours here. There's no number. We would just be tracking, I'm not sure what.
We just submit paperwork for the supervisor, for the interpreter, and then that's it. There's no actual requirement. But like, how would you even know what the supervisor is signing? Because they would have to get a supervisor's signature, right?
So that's up to you guys. You could just have it be an attestation.
But what about other certificates?
No.
Does HLO get information from
No.
other?
I'm a little unclear on that still.
Yeah.
If you guys wanted,
Then there is
Or-
paperwork that is being signed by a supervisor, but yet there's no actual thing. That's confusing to me.
if you guys wanted
Go ahead, Erin.
for a supervisor
Oh,
to submit on renewal the documentation, all that documentation with the trainee, you could do that. With the trainee's renewal, and you'd have Michael match it up, and then if it matched, then they would be renewed. But then you'd be waiting. But is that what we're asking? Like the supervisory record? And then match it to What am I missing?
I'm sorry to interrupt, this section 9 versus switching interpreters. One more. Just to add, in Darcy's example, for example purposes only, suggested a 10-hour requirement for each renewal. And so that way the in-training and supervisor would submit that, and they should match. Where I get confused is that for other licenses or other certification programs, there's some kind of documentation from a supervisor that I would assume that would document, for example, you said a hearing aid requires 120 hours, right? Who's signing that? Or how does the HLO verify that, do they get paperwork submitted to them? Is something signed, is something verified? How is the HLO verified? Because I'm getting two different stories that there can be a requirement, but then HLO is going to be tracking it. So how does HLO know that the person in training is actually meeting hours, if hours are required, to get the renewal? If hours are required. I don't know if that.
This
Makes
is
sense.
Lori. I think they're trusting that people are being honest on their applications, much like if I submit documentation to TSBC to show that I've gotten my 125 hours of professional development in, they believe me and I'm a professional and that's, nobody's gonna examine it.
I can have Tina come in and explain it.
Caitlin?
This is Caitlin speaking. My understanding from when we talked about the provisional and supervisory requirements is that we as practitioners keep records in case there's an audit, but otherwise we just sign the paper and say, yeah, it happened.
Amber?
Amber speaking. In our last meeting, I know that Mel had the smart idea of being able to have your RID transcript printed off and submit it along with the renewal application or the renewal process. So it's just the transcript of all of this. If you're not an RID member, I don't know if you can still access those transcripts or, or something along those lines, but you should be able to have certificates of completion and things like that. You can also submit. There is a way to verify those reviews based off of the completions.
This is Lori being a minute. I'm just thinking about Tina processing applications for people other than sign language interpreters and sign language interpreters and getting a stack of PDU forms from interpreters for all of the things that they've attended is not a good use of her space or her time. And what I don't want to have happen is interpreters are now waiting for 2 months to get their licenses instead of 2 weeks because she's thinking around with all these papers. I get where you're coming from, and it's a good practice, but in reality, it doesn't seem like a big use of time.
I mean, it could be submitted and as long as, just as the documentation's there, it doesn't necessarily mean they have to look at it. But if there is an audit that happens, they have the documentation already readily available within the Office of HLO to review it. So it doesn't necessarily have, I mean, I don't know your guys' process of how that's gonna go, but it's in the back at this point.
It's what, we would send it back.
I mean,
Unless you said we must submit, and we would. And then if you got audited, we would ask you for it anyway.
So I'm thinking, so I'm an Oregon certified interpreter for Spanish, right? So for my certification, I have to prove that my company proves that I did a certain number of work hours, right? We're just talking about a sign language interpreter in training. So we're asking them to just do some continuing ed. Maybe we have their, supervisor sign off, say, yes, I supervise this person over the last year, she should, or they should be moving forward. And that's it. Like, I don't think that it needs to be making complicated.
Agreed.
This is Caitlin. So we're just going to strike little e and break.
This is Aaron.
Aaron?
So I do want to strike it, but do we want to say, instead of name of supervisors, do we want to say a letter from one of your supervisors attesting that they worked with you this year? Say that instead. Doesn't have to be all of them, but just one of them,
Could we just do a signature instead?
or signature, like, yeah.
Yeah, supervisor.
So instead of name of current supervisors, a letter from your a form, something being signed by your supervisor to confirm that they worked with you this year, just from one of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, this is Christy, I think Sammy mentioned before, if you do that, then you can't do it online, correct? And you have it in person to do that?
Yeah, send it down. You could attest to it. You could attest your supervisor that you were supervised.
Attest to it online?
Yeah.
Okay, so do we want to change that? Online attestment from your supervisor?
No, it's from the applicant themselves.
Yeah.
Saying I attest. Supervise me. Then later, if there's audit, they're gonna ask for all of this.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. But it doesn't have to be like that.
But it's nice and fast,
Easy
easy.
to submit. We just have an archaic system. You get to that. I can't tell you why.
So this is Lori. We don't want this to be an arduous process for either interpreters who are trying to get their bloody license after so much confusion or the people who are having to process the licenses. So I think the easier, the better.
This
Caitlin?
This is Caitlin. But aren't these already going to be on case by case basis? So it already, filling it out online doesn't mean it's gonna be approved. We got it anyway.
Well, no, this information, this is the requirement. You can do a case by case where you can set some qualifications, whatever they may be, and they have to go to the board, and the board has to have something like this to go, okay, they met the requirement. But otherwise, if you set these as the requirement, and you meet them, you're gonna do it. Okay.
Aaron?
So if we have an online attestation by the sign language interpreter in training saying, I will supervise this year, then it gets renewed. What if those supervisors actually didn't feel like they should move forward with another renewal? Is that? I mean, do they need approval from one of their supervisors, at least one of them saying, okay, I think you should renew, I think this is a good idea. You know what I mean? Like, how are we gonna catch those ones that maybe they shouldn't renew or need additional support before they renew? I mean, I don't know, like, I don't wanna be too restrictive, but I also want us to be mindful of that.
Christine?
But if we're looking at it through the lens of an in training, they have unlimited opportunities. Which could be a problem at some point, but they're still learning. So if the supervisor says they're not ready and they're renewing, they're in training, then they're gonna get some more feedback and they're supervised and so forth. I would say it becomes an issue if we were looking at the other licenses. but not the in training.
Sammy, where are we at? We are adding, removing total number of supervised hours completed during the three-month cycle and making sure to add the S.
This is Darcy. Something I'm thinking about. If an interpreter is willing to supervise somebody for 1 year, and that individual ends up needing more training, or the interpreter tells them, you'll need more training. So do I sign that name or not? There's a time limit that I've set. Like, let's say some continue in training, or maybe they work with a different supervisor, we'll give them different feedback and different support that they might need. So the person in training needs to make it clear in the application renewal, in their renewal application, if they're going to be keeping that same supervisor, if they're going to be continuing with the same supervisor or someone else. I think there needs to be some clarification there. That way, supervisor is not stuck attached to an in-training interpreter for a prolonged duration.
So,
Erin?
this is Erin, are you saying then say name of current supervisor and future supervisor? Is that what you're saying? For this, for renewal, so they say, okay, this is the person who supervised me over the last year, and next year it's gonna be this person. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, so at renewal, maybe adding, there needs to be something there to be able to add who's going to be supervising during that new license period. Yes, Sammy?
Up under page 25. 24. As supervise, the training has to notify HLO within 5 days. If the supervision status is changed, it's completing and adding a new supervisor, moving a supervisor. So they have to be continuously keeping that up in 5 days. They shouldn't be waiting for renewal.
This is Erin. So then in that case, why do they have to give the name of the supervisor at all? Because they had to give them in the beginning. They shouldn't have to do a renewal, right? Because they've already given it.
Are you even?
They're just ideas, they could be bad ideas.
So maybe we don't even need, for the renewal, maybe we don't need the name of the current supervisor, because if they already have submitted that name, then you already have that information. So should we strike D and E?
You're contemplating that, we're gonna switch interpreters.
Go ahead.
Bill's got her hand up.
Mel, go ahead.
You're muted, Mel.
Actually, like we have interns and PCs. And
You're
they
good.
have 3 different supervisors because they're covering.
Okay, you're kind of in and out, Mel.
Sorry. How about that? Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. So if you have an intern sitting with a lot of different supervisors, and one of them is being asked to write the letter of attestment for renewal, I get curious about like the the life of an intern in some programs is not one supervisor, it's multiple supervisors that really each have something to bring to the table. And you can ask the one that's you're gonna ask the supervisor that's gonna say yes for the renewal and not ask the ones that think you should not for the renewal, right?
No. We don't need the supervisor to approve a renewal. We need the individual to attest to the fact that they were supervised. Period.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So removing D and removing E. Under 3 and 4.
Removing or removing?
Removing.
Thank you.
So you don't need to have that.
Okay, now we're on page. $30. This was 60 hours, but because it was a 3-year license, that was what I put in, but now we know it's an annual license. So I reduced it to 10, but that might be wrong. And maybe the 60 was wrong.
This is Amanda. You said we're on page 30, correct?
Yes.
With the continuing education. I think 10 makes sense. They already had stuff they need, what, 40 or 50 to apply, and then 10, 10, 10 to 60. So you're kind of building up to the provisional expectation. So I think keeping it at the 10 is fine. Marcia says, yeah.
Do you mean a total of 10 or 10 and 10?
10 and 10.
So a total of 20, great. I agree.
Yay. Got something accomplished.
Okay. That one's done. Do you guys, I have you scheduled to look at education, but you can pick provisional or education.
Caitlin's thinking, can we touch provisional just to say bump up the hours to that 80 or whatever we decided for pathway 3?
But the EIPA score and the dormant license.
License?
Dormant.
Oh.
Dormant status. On page 41. That's original start. 41. And 46 has the EIPA score. That you guys can fill in the dates and then score. That's what you, how you want it.
This is Caitlin speaking. So I was talking about the pathway 3 education and training, since the in training needs 40 hours. We talked about bumping up the provisional to 80 hours of education. Okay. That 80 hours?
You wanna do educational?
Up to you guys. Start on board pick or start on different. pick?
Yeah. So did we finish them?
No, provisional is not done. So in training, yes, provisional had to still use them, but we can go to the education, which starts on page 1.
37.
37.
This is Amanda. Can you remind me why this is worth our time since it's not in the new bill?
Lori, this day, wanted some specificity around what's happening in schools, when somebody who's an education interpreter is interpreting, and then like DHS comes in, and what happens when you need some bridge the gap, or you've got,
This is
Right, but isn't
already-
it going away altogether?
But it's staying intact until January 1, 2029.
Thank you. Thank you. That's what I need. Thank you.
On page 37, so maybe this is a dumb question, but I feel like when it talks about they're defining what an educational setting is, they don't actually say like a school building. It says like field trips and concerts and a nurse's office and IEP meetings, but I mean, isn't it also just like the classroom? Or am I missing something? I feel like you gotta state the obvious here too.
But they're not limited to.
Right.
it says-
So I propose add a classroom.
Mhm. Wait, what?
What about Mrs. Darcy, what about cancel open enrollment factory?
Samantha, help me understand D, the little d, in under 5, communication between DHS and the student regardless of where it happens, is education.
It's not.
It's not.
Does not include.
Hey, thanks. Appreciate Mr. 5. Yeah, even though I just said it. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
What about the, it says this is Darcy, DHS means like somebody from outside, like an outside interpreter comes in and can't use the educational interpreter for students that come into the school. That's not allowed, correct? Talk about that.
This is Christie, we don't want police or DHS interviewing students with an education.
Clarifying that, because I agree for the most part. But what if that educational interpreter is also qualified to do those kinds of interviewing in that kind of scenario? Is it just because we don't want that relationship?
Look at number 6.
Number 6.
On 39. This is largely beautiful.
It was largely took a while. Thank you.
Yeah. Good job. I appreciate number 6 very much, and this opens the door, but then each agency could potentially decide, yes, we want our own interpreter to accompany, or in this situation, no, it's not necessary. So I like that it allows that decision making kind of local.
This is Caitlin. My concern, and I think this is, I agree, beautiful. My concern is rural settings where we don't have a lot of outside interpreters available. This would mean bringing in VRI, which I think is great, but there would have to be some education of the schools that they need to be able to contract with somebody in order to do this. I don't know if that goes in financial impact or where that goes exactly, but I just want to throw it out there.
This is Chrissy. So in our case, the financial cost would go to the district providing services for the student. So it would be a financial impact, but I'm okay with that.
Or it might be the police department or
If they rent
DHS.
their own.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we want.
Yes.
But
So it should be either way, in my opinion.
But this kid was thinking, in the areas where there isn't any large agencies or very few outside interpreters, there needs to be something set up.
Yeah.
So that, I'm sure, because there has to be a VRI in place somewhere. It's a matter of figuring out who and where and how they will know that they need to set those kinds of contracts, because in the moment, police comes to talk to a student and we need a VRI right now.
this is Christine.
Mel.
Sorry.
This is Mel. I just also, again, want to point to the entity that should be providing the interpreters is DHS or the police. And also when there's a fiscal impact, sure, but the Office of Civil Rights looks at the budget of the whole district, and the cost of providing interpreters for one interaction or two is not an undue hardship for the school district, right? Allocating funds for it or even setting it aside, they look at the entirety of the whole district when they're looking at those budgets. The second piece is, in my work, usually the detective is scheduled to come out as well as CPS, and they have a couple of days notice. So while VRI is critical, it's also leveraging that, yes, you might have to pay for a quality interpreter to travel to that site to provide services. I'm thinking of places like New Mexico, Texas, very rural. People drive 3 hours to do an interpreting assignment. We do that. And we have to have that communication and scheduling ahead of time. When we Band-Aid and say, yes, we can provide this quickly, we also take away and disempower having an in-person interpreter and making these agencies consider communication access when they're scheduling these appointments. Just putting that out there. But I also like having VRI as an option for emergencies, absolutely. But also looking at processes, our state is a little bit behind in taking the effort to provide services and considering the time it takes to secure the services.
Yeah, thanks, Mel.
Yeah, go ahead.
Christy. Trying to hold all the information here. Now I've lost something that you said and I wanted to address. Oh, what do you do? So we have had DHS and these come. We call to make a report. We say it no less than 50 times. Child and staff needs an interpreter. Need for your interpreter. Need for your interpreter. They show up, no interpreter. Depending on what report has been made, like if it is this child should not return to the home, we still make them get an interpreter, or we hire a freelance to solve the problem right there. My experience, Mel, is that you do not get notified, they will say, we'll be out there today by 3, and then they show up at 3:30 and the student will come. Or we'll be there on Thursday at 2, and then they say, sorry, we're coming at 10. So they don't give you adequate notice. And I do think we should put it back on the responsibility of the agency, because until we do that, they will not change their ways, and they will continue to depend on us to solve the problem.
Interpretation is. The school, or the person who's working, or the person who has filed the complaint, whoever it is, police or CPS, are they following the appropriate process of providing interpreters for students?
In the district's, cite a grievance to DHS for not following their policies. I'm getting an interpreter, sorry.
Thank you.
My report was over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries. Yeah.
This first slide.
Part of your question, I think, was how does that information get relayed to those departments? And my opinion is, in my program, that would be my job, is to reach out to the police department, reach out to DHS and do some trainings with them and explain to them why this is the way it is, why this is their obligation, and here are some resources for you to use to get those interpreters. So a little different maybe in some other areas where the administrators don't know anything about deafness or interpreters, so I get the frustration.
This is Christy. I can also see bridges coming into play here, because they go and do some training with police departments around engaging with deaf people when making arrests and so forth. So I would think that would be an appropriate additional thing that they can be communicating to support.
This is Amanda. I want to back up to your question. The district can file a grievance against either DHS or the police, a complaint to the higher ups and say, hey, how come they are not following these policies? How come they're not following any of these processes?
That's all good.
You have, you already have.
This Christy, I have, and it goes nowhere. You call, you talk to the screener, that's you on to the supervisor. Well, so sorry about that. Do better next time.
Nothing.
Back to the room. And see if there's any other changes for that. Just because some of those policy issues are outside of our agenda.
I think it's good.
Thank you.
Thumbs up. Here's maybe some good fiscal stuff.
And I would also like to point out that the educational people in this room are just really fast and efficient in making decisions. Get it done.
I was also under my impression that school district was a big, like some, pay out of this pot and some pay out of that pot. None of the pots are the same. That's what we're doing.
True, that is
Right?
true.
So I'll get what's wrong with all those pots. So there was a lot. Okay. Let's do fiscal.
No, oh, no, I'm just ends here.
Let's do the fiscal impact on signing item. Do the fiscal impact on the entry. 30. 32. Are fairly efficient.
Feel attacked. But that's okay. The triple commentary.
Yes.
Okay. So. Number one, the state agency is likely to be economically affected, well, below one.
Sammy, if you wouldn't mind speaking up.
Yes.
And we appreciate your reading from it, but the interpreter can't see it, so if you can read a little bit slowly.
Any state agencies likely to be economically affected by the rule, if any, which ones? So I have the Health Licensing Office, Department of Education, think, I don't know, is, I'm assuming it's anywhere people my employer contract trainees, I don't really know where the people are gonna work. They could technically work anywhere as long as they have a supervisor.
This is Erin. Who pays the supervisor who's with the sign language interpreter in training? Is that a volunteer position? Or does that have an economic impact on the student? The volunteer.
I mean, it's not required to be volunteer.
I think it's negotiated between the two of them.
So could you argue then, this is Erin, that there's a economic impact on the student?
On the student getting this license?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because they might have to pay a supervisor to sign off on them or be with them.
That means that the impact, whoever's applying for either provisional or a training would be on that financially, or potentially.
We're talking about the some different signs for applicant or to apply, or the application, the piece of paper, we're talking about sign language grammar.
Some of these I think will cross over because let's talk through it. You could have somebody in training out of school, or not out of school, with a VHS sign language interpreter. And they were training, so that would affect VHS. So I almost feel like the possibility could be the same across the board. That's.
Yeah, that's fair.
They're just traveling along. So. That's what I'm thinking, so, but you guys can get more granular. Any other agent, I mean, God, it's endless, Department of Corrections, I could go on for days.
Do you have to list each agency that potentially, or could you say?
State and county.
Yeah. Question's pretty vague, but if I have like specific examples, then I'll try to use them and, like, I would probably say something for DOC and OYA, that if there was a deaf person or whatever you call it, then that could happen. So I would make some links there, to make sure kind of everything's covered, but not necessarily every single one. In general. See, I'm small business, so assuming small business.
Just to clarify, have we already set up fees for the licensures? Any or all of the licensures under
Senate Bill 950.
Bill 950? Or with the newest one, the training, have we not set up that fee structure yet?
Not to my knowledge, no. Okay. I think it's at some point coming, I mean, there's fee structure, but I don't have the fees. That's what you're asking.
Okay, I'm just curious. Erin, is there any potential for there to be a financial impact on universities or marketing programs? Did you already write that?
Yeah, I got them. I mean, throw them out. I don't have them all. And if you think of one, you can always email them to. Do you have like a certain situation?
One possibility, or potential impact for those in training is if, they're in an interpreting program, they're probably already broke. So, because they're in training, so there, of the timeline, those are two potential impacts, right? Because you're screening, you're ready, you're in a placement, but then you're not quite ready, and so you've got to renew your license, and things are dragging on.
The cumulative cost. Is something about that. Which I would also say for like in the licensing section, like potential and this, like a broad. It might cost between $45 and $85 to get a credential to get into the image generalist. So I'd be general, but give them some cost. These are like the worst thing ever to do. A lot of creative writing.
ODE.
I was gonna get with Georgianne for the specifics about that. Paying for the APAs, man. And you pay for that. What do you eat us, right?
People do.
Yeah.
People do. Interpreters do.
So small business would be like freelance interpreters, the interpreter agencies that send people out, or some of those in Oregon, I believe. Might be effective. Would freelance interpreter, supervisor, that could be effective in training? I guess it's possible.
Since Aaron, it could be like if I'm, like it could be you're giving up your own income, if you're volunteering to train someone else, so that could have a fiscal impact. So if you've made an arrangement to do that and you're losing hours that you could be earning money.
So compliance. Maybe identify the types of businesses. I mean, it really could be any type of business. They were contracting and employing.
Sorry, which letter are you on?
Oh, just move right along. I was on 5A and B.
The interpreters would take this opportunity to switch interpreters.
One of the questions I had, I answered when we did the first rulemaking, so I'll be able to go back and wrap in there too. Put there in supplies. Maybe copies and things that have to come in for licensing. Supervisor in training will have to do record keeping. The supervisor will have to do record keep. What that gives me. Now we're at a crossroads where we could. Just write that way. Page 33. Identify what persons in racial groups are impacted by the rule. Who is subject to the rule? What issues does the rule address? Who will be affected by the rule? This I don't know.
Everybody.
Literally.
Is this economic cost impact or just general impact?
Identify what persons and racial groups are impacted by the rule. And then it says who is subject to the rule.
Yeah, everyone. All. And insufficient, impacted, insufficient BIPOC supervisors. For those that are in training or provisional that want someone who is in a similar background as them for their training. That's just one example. So diversity, to provide that support. Not just we have a very, in general, we have a very white population of interpreters. In addition, let me think a little bit more about that. Something else. Oh, this one, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if it's related to this. Maybe on number 10, maybe it's number 10 of the. Need to develop, HLO developing a list of groups, minority groups, so that in training or provisional licensees can reach out to them for support. Because right now, I imagine an in training or provisional interpreter doesn't know what's available, doesn't know who's available. So if there's some kind of identifying markers on the list of available supervisory interpreters, that might be helpful for the in training or provisional license holder.
So we, on each application, it has questions about demographics and people choose to fill it out, or not fill it out. So it would always be skewed. I don't know about information to be honest, I don't know, I have to find out. We do. Usually have to be asked for specifically. I'm not sure how to ask.
Lori?
This is Lori, and right now, and I assume moving forward, the license lookup gives you the name of the person and the type of license they have, but it doesn't give any contact information whatsoever, correct?
HCI has something that they publish. And they're starting the new database. I have no idea if they're going to integrate anything about licensing. Very concerned. It's in this.
I'm thinking of a list of supervisors who is, you're talking about a list of supervisors who are already, just some kind of identification factors. If they are deaf, I'm thinking if they're deaf, if they're BIPOC, something that would help those that are looking to select supervisors or contact supervisors to give them some idea of who they are.
I'll have to ask if that can even be published if someone even.
Yeah, I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but just an idea.
This is Lori. I wonder if applications effective January 1 could include a statement that some of their demographic information will be shared on the site or something as sort of a
That sounds like a large piece of Louisville is from over here, and we're out.
Probably a good idea. If only we knew.
I'll put it in here, maybe we already have it somewhere. I'll check.
General rule lesson is never published. It's so private, you know.
Well, okay, this is Lori. I know, speaking from my TSPC license, it will show me the organization, at least where I work. So even something like that, or a city or something, that might narrow it down for someone to be able to find.
Yes, but not their reason.
No, I wouldn't.
Okay,
No.
What we can do.
Caitlin?
This is Caitlin speaking. I believe HLO database already has city.
Yeah.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
Oh.
Believe on RID, you can like narrow it down a little bit more, because there's some that was like, yes, I identify as BIPOC and I want that, my name to be attached to that group of people. So if they're RID certified, they might have that information. But it's up to the interpreter to decide whether that's true or not.
I mean, maybe somebody could check a box and say, you can tell everybody this information. I don't know, but I'll ask. What issue does the rule address? What issues does the rule address? That license. I mean, it doesn't, I don't know how. Doing sign language training, it's even across the board.
Sammy, I can't hear what you're saying.
I said, if you're doing sign language interpreting in Oregon, doesn't matter who you are, you have to have a license. So sometimes these questions are weird when it comes to like getting a license and it's required. But I can definitely work on, the lack of BIPOC people in the profession, I know that just based on reference. That was the case. Do any current stakeholders represent the racial groups likely to be affected by the rule? Identify what persons of racial groups are impacted by the rule. So. You got me, I don't know.
Caitlin?
Caitlin. Because interpreters and consumers come in all the colors of the rainbow and all the ethnicities that we have in little boxes. Not all of them are represented here. That's just fact.
Yeah, and usually I have a pretty generic answer for this question because it's usually always the same. I mean, unless it's like a practice standard, and I can give more data and that kind of stuff, like for midlives. Events. There's more data about that. People. But when it's a license, that's required for question and answer. So I will keep digging on that. I think we're at a good stopping point. Everybody agree? We can start tomorrow with the provisional. Finish it up.
We have,
Anna, are you gonna be at the meeting tomorrow?
Yes.
Did you say she was the form?
We write at 7, yeah.
We write at 7, everybody attends.
7 a.m.?
No, we'll be right at 7 people. No, it's 9:30. You're like, I would never start a meeting at 7:30.
Thank you.
Yeah, 9:30 and Amanda will be here. Val will be online. My out for the both days. Christy, you're gonna be here? Anna's gonna be here. Darcy, you're
Darcy
gonna
will be online.
Darcy will be online. Erin, you're in. Lori, you're in. Okay. Caitlin, you're out. Mel is in online and Amber's out. Okay, we got it. We'll start with provisional and I'll have highlighted copies for you tomorrow.
And this is Darcy, I will be connected
Oh, I'm
remotely.
sorry, we're not starting with provisional.
I will be connected remotely, just so you know, but I am going to be stepping away during this session for just a moment. I can't stay for the entire time. I'll be stepping away for a moment and then coming back in.
You'll have to let us know when and we'll have to stop the meeting.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
We gotta have 7.
Do we need to do public comment?
Yes, we'll get there. And tomorrow we won't be starting with provisional, I'm sorry. We're gonna start with the license, section 2 license, the people who are not in this state, but they're working. They're not physically in Oregon, but they're providing services. We'll do that and then the temporary work and then we'll do it. And public comment.
She'll have their hand up.
Oh, can I ask a quick question? This is Mel. Darcy, what time are you not going to be available? Because I have another meeting I'm trying to schedule as well.
I have to, let me look. $11:30 to 3, 11:30 to 1:45-ish. Play it safe. 1:45.
1:30 was my safe.
11:30 to 1:30, but play it safe, 1:45.
So we'd only have a quorum from 9:30 to 11:30? Is that what I'm hearing?
I see.
You guys can do it online, you don't have to.
I'll do it online. If we're saying we're only meeting that short time frame.
So we're gonna have a quorum.
Okay, so I will commit tomorrow, 9:30 to 11:30 is what I'm hearing.
Yep.
So just 2 hours, just to clarify, we're just gonna meet 9:30 to 11:30, okay?
Thank you.
We meet again after that, our next meeting would be the 16th and 17th. Am I right? Those are full day sessions.
I actually got the dates in October. I was confused about them as well. Can we confirm those 2 dates?
14, 15, 16.
So 14th, 15th, and 16th, really? Okay.
And we'll have to do some shuffling for that, because a couple people can only come for 2 of the meetings.
Yeah, we are lacking quorum. Quorum 7.
I know like Mel said she can come to 2 of the meetings, but can't do all 3. So we can move her from the fuller meeting to the one that we needed somebody. That makes sense. Struggle.
Mr. Christie, I'm available to attend on the 14th, but not the 15th or the 16th.
Yes. You will do.
Couldn't figure out how to do, so I think I'm on this place.
Have you fixed it out?
Yeah, I just delete the old one.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's original.
Yeah, I was getting notes too. I just can't comment on the notes.
Okay, so 2 hours tomorrow and we'll be prepared to talk about, I'll send you exactly what we're gonna talk about, so it's right on time.
And we're all gonna be online tomorrow?
My understanding.
Yeah, we're only gonna, I don't wanna make
I mean,
you drive.
you can come in
You're off duty for lunch orders.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
spaghetti pizza. Lots of pizza. Okay, let's do public comment.
So just to confirm, we're all online. You don't want me to come in from 9:30 to 11:30?
I don't know who that is.
That's Deanna.
Sorry, that's me.
I'm just online.
Just online. Okay, no worries. Thank you.
And then are we deciding about the rest of October tomorrow?
Yeah. At this time, the Board of Sign Language Interpreters Rules Advisory Committee will hear public and interested parties' feedback. Public comment is limited to matters listed on the meeting agenda. Topics relevant to the committee, statutory authority. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes, will not be allowed, subject to the committee's conduct of its business. If you're called on to comment, HLO staff will request the public member unmute themselves. The chairperson and HLO reserve the right to any person's comment only, and that HLO staff member comment not pertain to matters listed on the meeting agenda or topics relevant to what the committee has statutory authority to rate. Are there any members of the public who wish to comment? So please raise your hand using the Zoom feature. And wait till we acknowledge. Anybody on watch?
Yes, but they don't have their hand raised.
Nobody wants to comment? Nobody? Okay. Then Board of Language Interpreters Rules Advisory Committee is adjourned at 2:07 PM. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.